United States, the rate for 4-week T-bills is now negative 0.04%. How is that possible, considering the fact that Fed Chair Jay Powell has said that he does not want to deploy a negative yielding policy? They did drop rates to zero, but they're not planning to go negative in the near future.
They're not planning to go negative, but let me just put it mechanically for you. A T-bill is a discount rate security, so you pay 99.6 for it, and in a month you get $1. Well, there's so much money exiting stocks and bonds and commodities and gold and everything else, and it needs to hide somewhere, that they're buying 1-month T-bills as a placeholder for that money, that they're now paying over $1 to get $1 in the future, which is how you wind up with negative interest rates.
This is amazing.
It's a sign of people looking for a place to put their money after they've liquidated something, and they're paying big premiums for them right now. Now, remember, the negative interest rates are like -1 or -2 basis points. They're not seriously negative like we've seen in Europe.
So, Jim, just give us, a 30-second call from you on what we're beginning to emerge, fiscal stimulus by this White House and by Congress. What's your take?
Whatever they do is not going to be enough. I joked yesterday that we started the day with $850 billion and we ended the day at $1.2 trillion. That is actually growing faster than the virus counts right now. And I think when you start looking at what some of the European countries are doing, talking about 9 or 10% of their GDP in stimulus, we're talking $2 trillion plus. That probably will get into the ballpark range of what I think is probably needed. So they're getting there, but they're taking way too much time right now.
Jim Bianco, thanks so much for joining us. We really appreciate your thoughts there. Jim Bianco, president and founder of Bianco Research, getting his thoughts. Lisa, it's always good to get Jim's thoughts. He's been, I think, consistently, let's call it, conservative in kind of his outlook.
He's been right.
Yeah,
he's been right.
He's been absolutely right.
Let's just call a spade a spade. I mean, he basically said the Fed should drop rates to zero, and they did in short order. And I will say the fact that I'm just so struck by the idea that investors are paying for the privilege to receive dollars in 4 weeks' time because of the dollar shortage and because of the fact that people are that concerned about cash preservation and the emphasis on liquidity. I think that really speaks to the mood of the moment.
Yeah, and it's interesting, and Jim bringing up kind of the structure, how the dealers have changed and some of the regulatory structures over the dealers, preventing them from perhaps providing the liquidity that is needed in the market. So that's something that I'm sure the regulators will go back and address address kind of post haste and take a look at. Right now, we have S&P down 5%. This is Bloomberg.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
This is the Bloomberg Green Business Report. You could call it organic hand sanitizer, not made in some corporate factory, but distilleries around the country, putting their spirits to work to help fill the shortage caused by the coronavirus outbreak. Chad Butters, founder of 8 Oaks Farm Distillery in New Tripoli, Pennsylvania, converted his operation when he started checking out skyrocketing prices.
The very first result on Google was $328 for a 1-ounce bottle. I think that's ridiculous. It's shameful.
So his distillery shifted focus, experimenting with high-proof alcohol, aloe, and glycerin to get just the right consistency. The recipe is based on one published by the World Health Organization. Well, the price? Butters says whatever people decide to donate. As word got out about what Eight Oaks was up to, the distillery began hearing from people in groups in need, including a pediatric cancer organization and a woman whose 12-year-old son has heart disease and was desperate for hand sanitizer to keep him safe. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Have you ever thought, I wish I'd had that information sooner?
What does this tell us about the state of deal making?
Let's fix that.
One unprofitable company plus another doesn't make a profitable company.
Carol Mazur.
Talk to us about real-world applications.
Jason Kelly.
Remind us what the potential is for everyday folk.
Bloomberg Business Week.
Vice President of Exploratory Science is one of the cooler titles.
Weekday afternoon at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney.
Are we on the brink of a more serious downturn?
I've always thought of the municipal bond market as a little bit of a safe haven.
Banks are going to have to start paying their depositors more.
Are we still in that mode where we're buying the dip?
Breaking market news and insight from Bloomberg experts.
Cash, if you're looking at Treasury bills, provides a higher return than stocks and bonds here in the U.S.
If your consumer is a woman, you're more likely to be a growth company.
Longer-term interest rates can go down, even with short-term interest rates still going up a little bit.
This is Bloomberg Markets with Lisa Abramowitz and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
It is still March. It is still the middle of the week. Coming up here, we're going to be speaking about the fate of brick and mortar in the era of coronavirus. Also, we will get the view from a virologist on just how widely spread the coronavirus has gotten. Right now, though, let's get some numbers. John Tucker, what you looking at?
I'm looking at I'm almost throwing up my hands like at a loss to explain a lot of this, Lisa. Stocks right now, the S&P 500 down more than 5%, erasing nearly all of yesterday's gains amid the grim picture for the coronavirus cases worldwide. Now, the current stretch of volatility, almost unheard of. Economists bracing for recession as the outbreak continues to slam economies across the globe. Treasuries, they look relatively steady today. Again, that's relative after the biggest yield jump since 1982. Also, muni bonds, you had touched on this, extending the deepest route since 1987. The markets, they're bracing for a potential flood of spending and fiscal stimulus. Right now, the Dow Jones Industrial Average, 5.4% lower. We're down 1,153 points on the Dow. Still above 20,093 right now. The S&P 500 down 125 points. That's a decline of just about 5%. We're at 2403. The Nasdaq Composite Index down 281 points. That's a decline of 3.8% at 7,054. And the 10-year yield right now, 107. There was a bid earlier. Right now, it's up about 1/32 in price. So some slight action there. Crude oil continues its slide. Look at NYMEX crude, down 14%. Just for today, $23.13. Now, what's the safe haven right now? It's King Dollar. The dollar strength for a seventh straight day. We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Lisa and Paul.
John Tucker, thank you so much. Bloomberg Markets is brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit commonwealth.com to learn more. Well, John Tucker was just reporting another risk-off day. Lots of red on the screen. Let's see where the action is with the small caps. We do that with Bloomberg Stocks editor Dave Wilson. Dave, what do you have for us?
Well, smaller companies taking bigger hits in today's trading. The Russell 2000 index down 6.8%. While the S&P 500 is lower by 5%. The biggest declines in the Russell belong to commercial mortgage companies. Their shares are just getting obliterated in today's trading. Biggest drop belongs to Redwood Trust. The ticker is RWT. The stock's down 51.5%. Granite Point Mortgage Trust, ticker GPMT, is down 48.5%. Blackstone Mortgage Trust, ticker BXMT, is down 40.5%. And then you have Ladder Capital, ticker LADR. It's down almost 40%. The commercial real estate lender filed to sell as much as $100 million of shares for current stockholders. Then we turn to the casino owners. Their business has been interrupted by the coronavirus, and their shares are taking some pretty substantial hits at the moment. Penn National Gaming, ticker PENN, is down more than 34%. And El Dorado Resorts, ticker ERI, is also down more than 34%. That said, there are some stocks in the Russell moving higher. The biggest gain belongs to Waiter Holdings, ticker WTRH. It's a food delivery service. So at the time of coronavirus, people are figuring maybe they'll get more business. The shares are up almost 66%. That's translates into a price of about $1.26 a share, though. Should point out, Waiter, along with the smaller Blue Apron Holdings, has been rallying this week in response to all the restaurants having to close up their dining rooms.
Yeah, if you're going to have to cook at home, we'd rather have somebody else chop it for you ahead of time, I'll tell you, especially with two kids. Dave Wilson, Bloomberg Stocks editor, thank you so much for being with us. I want to pick up on the point that you were talking about, the tumbling commercial mortgage REIT values, because that's exactly where we're going, to brick and mortar, in particular the shopping mall. Wither the shopping mall in a post-coronavirus era. Tom McKee, President and Chief Executive Officer of the International Council of Shopping Centers, joining us right now. How bad is it out there, Tom?
Well, good morning, and thanks for having me on. First and foremost, health and safety to each of you. It's a challenging environment. Obviously, the government is taking unprecedented steps and appropriate steps to protect everyone's health and safety, but that's placing, really kind of an insurmountable strain on our members. And ICSC represents not just the mall industry, but all brick and mortar retail, as well as the tenants that occupy the space. And so, our request to the government is to either guarantee or directly support business interruption insurance in the interim, in the immediate term for the industry.
So, Tom, again, you represent the shopping centers around the United States. Just give us a state of health of where they are right now going into this crisis.
Well, obviously, the industry going into the crisis, I think, was relatively healthy. Obviously, there are some large macro trends that were impacting the industry around e-commerce and technology in general and demographics. But I think the industry had evolved to really try to curate its tenant mix to meet the changing needs of consumers. But everything's changed over the course of the last, week or two, and changes by the hour. And we're clearly in a very dire situation right now as people protect their health and safety appropriately and stay home and don't go out to public places. That's obviously having a dramatic impact upon retailers and bars and restaurants, gyms and service providers and all the folks that occupy shopping centers, whether that's a neighborhood grocery center or a regional mall. And by the way, our industry is here and ready to support the government's actions. We obviously have large parking lots and some unoccupied space that could be used for emergency shelter and healthcare purposes. But we do need the government to step in and support the industry and provide business interruption insurance. Guarantee.
Tom, some people have been arguing that disruptions like this, crises like this, accelerate changes that are already in effect. And some people are saying the shift to Amazon, to online ordering and shipping is really just getting accelerated, but that trend was in place before. What do you say to that, to the people who say this is just sort of speeding up what we already saw in retail, in brick and mortar?
Well, first and foremost, I don't know that we can make any kind of long-term prognostications around the impact of the virus and the crisis that we're living through. This is unprecedented. So it's really hard to anticipate what tomorrow is going to bring, let alone 3 to 6 months from now. Look, the industry is enormous. 90% of all retail sales still happen within brick and mortar retail. Shopping centers are integral to every community. As people drive down the main street of their towns, that is generally the center of the community, and so there's a lot of attention that's often placed upon a segment of the industry. But when you really think about physical retail and what it provides and supports to a community, it's kind of integral to everyday life. And so the industry was not dying before this. It was changing and evolving. This is just a unprecedented event that's obviously going to have a significant, and is having a significantly dire impact upon an industry that we all rely upon every day. And by the way, the communities rely upon it. I mean, it's the biggest source of, the industry is the biggest source of jobs in America. It's the biggest source of sales and property tax revenue that supports, community infrastructure, et cetera.
Right. Tom McGee, thanks so much for joining us. Tom is President and Chief Executive Officer of the International Council of Shopping Centers. Again, that organization, and Tom sent a letter to President Trump asking for some economic relief as the stay-at-home movement expands, obviously impacting local retailers across the board. This is Bloomberg.
Right now, let's head over to our 99.1 studios in Washington, D.C. Nathan Hager. Nathan.
All right, Lisa, thank you. President Trump says he's closing the border with Canada to try to stop the spread of the coronavirus. On Twitter, the president says it's a mutual decision to halt non-essential travel temporarily. He says it will not affect trade. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says his chamber will vote today on the $100 billion stimulus package passed by the House. It includes free testing for coronavirus and paid sick leave extensions. McConnell says senators won't leave until they pass an even larger stimulus measure. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin is floating a proposal worth $1.2 trillion. More from Bloomberg Chief Washington correspondent Kevin Cirilli.
In speaking with sources yesterday, really the partisanship on this issue is gone. Republicans and Democrats agreeing that all Americans, particularly those who are reliant upon small businesses, are going to need immediate liquidity, and they're going to need it within the next week and a half.
On the Senate floor this morning, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says President Trump waited too long to, in his words, wake up to the crisis. He says the U.S. is falling behind on ventilators and intensive care beds. Bernie Sanders says he's reassessing his campaign, but he's focused in the immediate term on the government's response to the coronavirus. That's after Joe Biden swept the 3 states that held Democratic primaries last night.
Senator Sanders and I may disagree on tactics, but we share a common vision for the need to provide affordable health care for all Americans, reduce income inequity that has risen so drastically, to tackling the existential threat of our time, climate change.
Biden live-streamed his victory speech from his home in Wilmington, Delaware. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance?
Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now, there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
The average time a resume spends on an HR manager's desk is 7 seconds, and most of them are tossed aside. Now imagine if one of those resumes belonged to Yasmin, who was
living in a shelter, juggling 3 jobs. I had to be resilient. That's something that you can't teach.
We rely so much on a resume, yet it could never tell the full story of someone who
had to be independent and take initiative, and that's how I handle every project I get.
Discover new ways to develop great talent at gradsoflife.org. Brought to you by Grads of Life and the Ad Council.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
All the pieces.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction. Will he have to abide by a subpoena?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Check out the Bloomberg Newsroom with your Bloomberg Business Flash. We are firmly in the red right now. The major averages, in fact, approaching what could be a circuit breaker. Dow Jones Industrial Average down 1,393 points. That's a decline of 6% right now. The S&P 500, 153 points lower. That's down 6%. We're at 2375. The NASDAQ Composite Index is down 363 points. That is down 5% right now. And as we look at Treasuries, the 10-year yield, 1.06%. It is down as we do get a bid to the benchmark up 4.30 seconds in price right now. Oil is an ugly story. NYMEX crude is down almost 16%. We're at $22.72 a barrel right now. That's a decline of $4.22 just in today's session so far. Looking at the screen, if you want to find some green on the screen, there is a few stocks, more than a few stocks, up right now, including Clorox. Those shares up 5.8% in today's trading.
Got it.
We check the markets for you every 15 minutes during the trading day right here on Bloomberg Radio. I'm John Tucker. That's your Bloomberg Business Flash. Paul and Lisa.
John, thank you so much. Let's head to Virginia Governor Ralph Northam, who's holding a briefing on the coronavirus right now. Let's take a listen.
Come to my desk in our budget. Yes. Hi.
The ACLU is calling for pretrial jail inmates to be released as well as vulnerable prison populations like people who are very elderly or terminally ill. Is that something that your administration is considering right now?
Secretary Moran, if you might want to answer that. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Brian Moran, Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security. And Mel, we are looking at all available means by which to ensure the safety of our citizens, including those residents of our local jails and prison facilities. Department of Corrections has taken some extraordinary steps to not only secure the health of their inmates, but also of the personnel at DOC. We have suspended visitations. Lawyers now have non-contact visits, and we have suspended transfers of inmates from local jails. We are working with our sheriff community to take the necessary steps to continue to ensure the safety of all involved.
Governor, maybe a question for you, Dr. Oliver. Talk about the three outbreaks, one being in Maine City County. You touched on it yesterday, you elaborated on what you want those individuals 65 and older to do. I mean, they are still working. Could you elaborate each one of those individuals 65 and older to do? And also, could you clarify, is it 17 cases in the Peninsula Health District or 17 in Maine City County?
It's 17 in James City County, and that's the particular outbreak that we're referring to in the Peninsula District. And Governor, did you want to address the 65 and older?
If you can address that.
I think the guidance is pretty clear. Folks who are 65 and older, unless they're doing work that is absolutely essential, they should be staying at home and distancing themselves from any kind of interaction. They're at higher risk of becoming gravely ill from COVID-19, and that's their best defense from getting that infection.
And just to follow up, thank you, Dr. Oliver. There's been some terms that have been used, self-quarantine versus self-isolate. And I would still encourage all Virginians, including those that are over 65, that this doesn't mean that they have to stay in a room in their house. I mean, on a pretty day, for example, we would encourage them to get out and take a walk. But again, to remember keeping their distance from other individuals. That's the main thing, to keep them safe.
Temporarily suspending their drive-through testing sites.
Yes, I may have our director of our lab, but I would just remind folks, and I think that every day our ability to test our supplies are better and will continue to get better, but there's still a screening mechanism. Questions will be asked. Has someone had contacts? Have they had travel to endemic areas? Do they have the symptoms of the fever, the cough, the shortness of breath? And if they meet the criteria, then they will be tested. So until further notice, we'll still go through that screening process and then the testing as a second step. You might want to elaborate on the testing. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Dr. Denise Tony. I'm the director of the Department.
Virginia Governor Ralph Northam holding a briefing in Virginia. And Paul, he was talking about some of the guidelines for individuals about how to self-isolate or social distance, and saying people can go out, but just keep your distance from people. This is a fast-moving story. We'll try to bring you what we can as some context. Virginia has submitted a request for federal small business aid, which would be a low-interest loan of up to $2 million. Paul, that's sort of the lay of land there.
Very good. So, Lisa, I think what people are one of the things they're trying to get a hold of here is just kind of where are we in the curve of the additional cases. Dr. Paul Gepfert, professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and also a director of the Alabama Vaccine Research Clinic, joins us now. Dr. Gepfert, give us your sense of kind of where we are in the curve of new cases in the United States.
Well, unfortunately, we're in the rising part of the curve. If you look at any of the estimates or any of the curving trends, there's no leveling off right now. So we still haven't begun to level off yet. So we're at the sort of logarithmic growth phase of the curve.
Which is a little bit frightening, considering the fact that Mayor de Blasio here in New York is asking for military assistance as he sees the cases absolutely surge with nearly 1,000 confirmed cases. And we've all had anecdotes about people having a hard time getting a test who think that they have the symptoms. So the likely tally is probably quite a bit higher. Given how quickly the number of cases is rising, the logarithmic scale, how many people in the United States do you think, what proportion do you think will end up getting this virus?
Well, I think it all depends on our response to this pandemic. If everybody takes seriously the whole part about social isolation and does not go out unless they absolutely have to, and the people who need to go to work or people who are needed to have a functioning society, so healthcare workers, police, ambulance, so on and so forth. If we do that, then the numbers will be a lot less. I can tell you that we're on the same trajectory as Italy right now. Italy currently has 31,000 cases, and they're still growing. And so it doesn't look good. We are a larger country than Italy, so we may be able to handle that a little bit better, but that's still not a great sign. So there's been estimates, extreme estimates if we did nothing at all, or we don't even want to think about that because we are finally doing something.
So, Dr. Gepfert, give us a sense of kind of how you think this will play out. It looks like the federal government is really mobilizing. So do you expect is this really a story right now of just getting test kits into as widely disseminated as possible to get a real handle on kind of what the numbers are? Do you think is the most critical issue right now?
Well, that is. That's one of the critical issues. That's very important. I think it's fair to say now that it's inundated our society and that people need to not wait for a test. If they have the symptoms, then they need to self-quarantine. And I've had many people here where I am in Alabama, which has been sort of late in the game. And again, it's because we haven't had the tests here. We were one of the last states to actually have a test. We've gone from one case less than a week ago to 46 cases today. So that's a huge growth. And I have a lot of patients and employees who are starting to develop symptoms now. We even have one of our lead infectious disease doctors here in town who started our HIV clinic many years ago, who tested positive for coronavirus. it's in our society. I think people need to realize that if they get sick at all, the best thing for them to do is self-quarantine unless they start, developing respiratory difficulties, in which case they probably need to go to the emergency department.
Dr. Gepford, given the fact...
I will just say that testing is important because it's likely that there are many people who are not developing symptoms, and people who've been exposed. That would be important as well, but we're not able to do any of that right now because the testing is so, we have so few tests to be able to do that.
Dr. Gepford, you're a professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Alabama in Birmingham. You're also the director of the Alabama Vaccine Research Clinic, and the focus right now is how quickly can we get some sort of medication, some vaccine to be a circuit breaker here. We do hear about Chinese pharmaceutical companies developing something and actually entering a human testing phase. How quickly could we get something in circulation that could severely limit the spread?
Okay, so treatment is about to start. In fact, we've started that study for a treatment. It's a drug called remdesivir. It was actually produced in part at UAB, but it was a collaborative effort. It's owned by Gilead now, and that treatment has already started. So patients who are infected, who are in the hospital, we are doing a randomized control study to see if that is an effective drug. We should know the answer of that in a few months. That drug could potentially be used for prevention as well, but I'm not aware of any studies that are looking at that for prevention. The best prevention, as you probably know, is a vaccine. Vaccine studies have started in this country and in China. In China, I'm not sure what their timeline is. In this country, you have to first do safety, and then safety and immunogenicity, and then you can do an efficacy study, and that generally takes at least a year and a half if everything goes well.
So Dr. Gep, it seems like that's the timing issue here. Is there any way to accelerate any of those timelines?
I don't think so. Not for the vaccine. For the drug treatment, it's a little bit easier, and we already have a drug in hand that has been tested in humans already. So it was tested. It was originally developed for Ebola. So we don't have to do small studies at first. So we can skip that. So that will likely be developed if it works more rapidly. But the problem with vaccine testing is you have to test safety, and because we know that there are certain vaccines in the past that have actually worsened disease outcomes. So you can't just go really, really quickly. And you can't even test to see if it works unless you have an ongoing epidemic. And so the SARS-1 vaccine was developed in 2004, and they had it ready to go, but then the epidemic went away, and so they couldn't test it.
So, but Dr. Gepford, just to sort of wrap things all together, the big concern with so many people getting the virus is that particularly older and also immunocompromised individuals have a very high hospitalization rate. Governor Cuomo of New York yesterday saying it could amount to almost 20% of cases, considering that has been the rate of hospitalization for those tested. Is that a skewed number for just those who actually got tested, considering how we are not really testing that many people?
I think 20% is a good number. That's been borne out in China. 17 to 20% of people who develop COVID-19 end up needing hospitalization. So that is the biggest problem right now with this disease. Mortality is bad. It can be upwards of 4%, and it's anywhere from 0.5 to 4%. But the problem is when you have 20% of people that need hospitalization, and you have the numbers that we're seeing, which I think is 6,500 right now in the U.S. and growing logarithmically, that our healthcare infrastructure is going to be inundated. In parts of the country, it's already that way. And so I think that's the biggest problem, running out of supplies, running out of medical supplies. Look what is happening in Italy right now, where you have to decide on who gets care and who doesn't get care. And that's what we really want to avoid, and that's why this social isolation and staying out of crowded situations is absolutely essential for the United States right now.
Dr. Paul Gepfer, thank you so much for being with us, professor in the Division of Infectious Diseases at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and also director of the Alabama Vaccine Research Clinic. Let's head to New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, currently giving a briefing on the coronavirus, talking about how the medical system is gearing up for being inundated by coronavirus patients. Let's listen in.
So if Commissioner Zucker looks a little tired today, that's why. Young people have no stamina, I like to say. The president I spoke to this morning, he's going to be making arrangements to send up this hospital ship, which is called the U.S. Comfort. It has about 1,000 rooms on it. It has operating rooms. And the president is going to dispatch the Comfort to us. It will be in New York City Harbor. This will be, it's an extraordinary step, obviously, but it will, it's literally a floating hospital, which will add capacity, and the president said that he would dispatch that immediately. The president also spoke about the mobile hospitals that the federal government has and where we could set up mobile hospitals where they come in with a mobile hospital that has a capacity of 200 people, 250 people. I told the president that we would do everything we need to do to expedite siting of those facilities, and we're talking about a couple of locations now. But that is also specific and concrete help and something that we can get done within the 45 days. At the same time, as I said, we're proceeding on all these tracks simultaneously. Density reduction. We've taken a number of dramatic steps, but I think they are necessary steps. You've seen the curve. We can't handle the number of cases in the healthcare system at that current rate of spread. We have to get it down. We've taken dramatic steps. I've said, and I'm going to repeat today, I'm asking all businesses voluntarily, if it is at all possible, work from home and have your people work from home. We also have already announced a mandatory requirement that all schools are closed statewide, a mandatory requirement that no more than 50% of any government's employees can show up for work. Essential personnel, yes, but no more than 50% of city, local governments. We also have a mandatory requirement, as you know, of a tri-state agreement. Pleased to announce that Pennsylvania is going to be joining our state coalition, and that's very exciting because none of these measures work unless you have a large enough geographic basis. It makes no sense for a county to try to put its own rule into effect or a city to put its own rule into effect because people will just move. If I can't go to a bar in Queens, I'll drive to Nassau and go to a bar. If I can't go to a restaurant in Albany, I'll drive to Schenectady. So the geographic footprint, by definition, is essential for these to work. And frankly, even if I come up with a rule for the entire state, people will drive to New Jersey or Connecticut or Pennsylvania. And that's why the first ever we have this statewide coalition. And I want to thank Connecticut Governor Ned Lamont and New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy very much, and Pennsylvania Governor Tom Wolf, who've been great colleagues, and I thank them very much. Again, I'm asking all businesses to work from home, but today we are announcing a mandatory statewide requirement that no business can have more than 50% of their workforce report to work outside of their home. No more than 50% of the workforce can report for work outside of the home. That is a mandatory requirement. I'm going to do that by executive order, and that is statewide. That will exempt essential services, meaning food delivery, pharmacies, healthcare, shipping, supplies, etc. Society has to function. People stay at home. People still need to be able to order food. food, etc. They need to be able to shop. So you have to keep those essential services running. I understand that this is a burden to businesses. I get it. I understand the impact on the economy. But in truth, we're past that point as a nation. There is going to be an impact on the economy, not just here in New York, but all across the country. And we're going to have to deal with that crisis. But let's deal with one crisis at a time, and let's deal with the crisis at hand. And the crisis at hand is a public health crisis. Once we get past that, then we'll deal with the economic crisis. There's an old Italian expression that basically says, rough translation, a rich person is a person who has their health. Everything else you can figure out. And that's true for a society also. Let's maintain the public health. We'll figure out the economy afterwards. We've consulted with a number of business organizations, and I want to thank them for their cooperation and their receptivity. The Business Council, the Retail Council, ABNY, the Partnership for New York City, they're the main business groups in this state. They understand the concern and the crisis that we're dealing with, and they're helping communicate the message. And I thank them for their understanding and for their civic consciousness in this matter. You can see from the number of cases why we're taking these actions. We are responding to science and data. There's no politics here. The health commissioner and health officials advise us of what we should be doing. The number of cases is way up. The number of cases is up because we're taking more tests. But the numbers are going up. Hence, increased actions to reduce the spread, the density reduction. You see total positive cases 2,300, new positive cases 1,000. You see the number of counties that now have cases spreading, just as you see it spreading across the United States of America. This is just a metaphor for the entire country. You see our number of tests has gone way up. We've now tested over 14,000 people. That's a dramatic increase. And again, that's why you see the number of positive cases going up. We have the highest number of cases in the United States, again, by a significant margin. We're now about double the next state. I don't know how much of that is due to our increased testing, but we are a more dense environment. We have more people than Washington State. So science would dictate, mathematics would dictate that you'll have a higher rate of spread. Current hospitalizations are 549. Again, that is the number we watch because that's the number that are flowing into the healthcare system. That's the rate of cases flowing into the healthcare system. 23%. We had 20% yesterday. We had 14% last week. So the number of hospitalizations is going, has been. Again, perspective. I understand the anxiety. I understand the fear. You look at the pictures on television, empty grocery shelves. It's easy to get caught up in the emotion. But you also have to remember the facts of the situation, right? And the facts are still very clear. We know what this virus does. We know who it is. We know where it lives. We know what it does to people. It's been tracked since China. 200,000 cases have been tracked. 8,000 people have passed away. 80,000 have recovered. 113 are still pending. We even know what it's done in the state of New York. Of the numbers we've seen in New York since it started, 108 people have already recovered and been discharged from the hospital. The first case we had in New York, which was the healthcare worker and her husband who returned from Iran, and tested positive. She never went into a hospital. She was at home, quarantined. She has now been recovering at home. She actually took a second coronavirus test and tested negative. Okay? So, 39-year-old female came home, was at home, was on quarantine, recovered. 2 weeks later, tests negative, which means she has resolved the virus in her body, right? And now tests negative. And as we've said, 80% of the people, that's what will happen. She was never hospitalized, and she resolved 2 weeks later. That's what people have to keep in mind. And look, this is a health issue. It's a public health crisis. But more than that, I'm telling you, worse than the virus is the fear that we're dealing with, and the rumors and how they spread, and I'm going to be quarantined, I'm going to be locked out, they're not going to allow me to leave my house, I better stock up on groceries. That's not going to happen. It's a deep breath. We know what is going to happen here. People will get ill. They will resolve. People who are vulnerable, we have to be careful. But the panic and the fear is wholly disconnected from the reality. The only way I know to communicate it is just what I experience in my own life. And I get those calls every day. And people are just disconnected from the reality of the situation. One of my sisters called me yesterday. I have to have my daughter tested for coronavirus. Why? She has a fever, she's sick, she has flu-like symptoms. I said, has she been exposed to someone positive? No, not that we know of. Did she travel to a hot spot? No. I said, then there's no test, and there's no reason for a test. Leave her home, help her, be careful that she doesn't infect you, but that's it. And flu-like symptoms, and a couple of weeks, she'll feel better, and she'll get on with it. The one thing I said to my sister is, don't let her go near mom. It's my mother. My mother's in a different situation. Again, senior citizen, but senior citizens compromise the immune system, underlying illness. I said, don't let her go near mom. Otherwise, treat her as if she has the flu. Well, what do? What's self-quarantines? Well, self-quarantine is what we used to do when somebody had the flu, right? My father would say, go in the room, stay there until you feel better, right? That's crude self-quarantine. Don't get infected, stay away, throw things away, use hand sanitizer, etc. That's the reality of the situation. I get the drama, I get the anxiety, but all in moderation and all in connection with the facts. Questions, comments?
A few details. Essential services, does that include like building supply stores like Home Depot, Curtis Lumber? When does this order take effect? And then for the doctor, obviously healthcare workers are exposed, they're going to get sick, they're going to resolve. If you've been 14 days and you're resolved, do you get to return to the healthcare workforce? So I guess Governor, start maybe.
Yeah, Jimmy, I'll answer your question, but I forgot one thing. I want to show you the ventilator. Our main scramble now is for ventilators, and everybody says, well, what are the ventilators? What are the ventilators? This is a respiratory illness. We need ventilators which will actually, the ventilators actually help people breathe. This is the machine that you often see in hospitals. It's commonplace in hospitals. It's just the number that we need is much higher. And any manufacturers of ventilators, This is a national need. Every state across the country needs it. I'm talking to governors all across the state. GE makes them, Philips makes them, but this is the number one device that we need because we can create more beds, but it's literally the supply of ventilators now. And countries all across the globe are all trying to get these devices. So that's the main challenge. The question on, after 14 days if you test negative, can you go back to work? You go back to work.
So she could be is she? I don't know. Okay. And then for you, building supply stores, and when does this take effect?
We're going to have a full list of essential services. I believe, I don't want to get into any specific business right now, but we'll list all the essential services.
Do you have any timetable how long these restrictions are going to last, just for parents, small businesses, et cetera, that we're trying to plan?
No, but all of the restrictions are statewide. They will track the trajectory of the disease. If we get that spread down, Jesse, if we slow the spread and we can handle it in the healthcare system, we'll relax them as soon as possible. Past data, China, South Korea, shows that if you take more dramatic actions sooner, you actually reduce the spread and you recover faster. So more dramatic on the front side, the faster you get out of it. I've also spoken with elected officials all across the state. I've told them that this 50% mandatory requirement was going to be in place, and we've heard nothing but support. And I want to thank all the local officials, and I want to thank them for their cooperation.
Speaking of dramatic action, though, what about shelter in place? Can you explain why you're resistant to that and why that's no longer on the table for you?
Shelter in place first would have to be done. I don't believe any policy works unless the geographic footprint is large enough. I'm from Queens, New York. If you tell me shelter in place and I'm living in Queens, I'll go stay with my sister in Westchester and I'll go out and have a good time, right? So it can't just be New York City. It would have to be Long Island, Rockland, Westchester, and the rest of the state. Also, shelter in place, you close down your healthcare system. You close down your food system. You close down your transportation system.
That's necessarily true. But in the Bay Area, certainly essential services.
Well, it depends how you do it. And you close down businesses. You close down all businesses when you do shelter in place. So that doesn't make sense to me because people have to eat, travel, etc. Doing it this way, all workforce 50%, except essential services. We'll see if that slows the spread. If it doesn't slow the spread, then we will reduce the number of workers even further. That 50% can be calibrated. Now, you could get to a point where you could get to 100% of workers stay home besides essential services. That's what Italy wound up doing. And we're at 50% now. But I would never shut down food, transportation, essential services.
Governor, the comptroller yesterday put out a new revenue forecast, as you know. Worst case scenario, $7 billion hit the state is facing. Will that require a cut in spending as you had initially proposed in the budget? Will this mean less spending for schools, for instance?
That's something we're going to have to work out in the budget. But as I said, the original estimates we did were before any of this, and they are, any reasonable person would say, too high. So we'll have to do a budget on the best projections that we can do, and then we go from there.
Does that mean then is it time to look at raising revenue? You were reluctant to do that in your proposed budget. Now with such a big cold, you have to raise taxes?
Yeah, look, you have businesses closing, you have people out of work. I don't think now is the time to tell people we're going to raise your taxes.
Yesterday you said that you were meeting with the Army Corps of Engineers. Have you met with them yet?
This afternoon.
And what are you hoping to explain to them regarding that?
Army Corps of Engineers, well, let's say federal writ large, okay, because you have DOD, you have FEMA, you have the Army Corps of Engineers. additional hospital beds, the mobile hospitals, helping to retrofit existing buildings. Those are all within the purview of the federal government.
Governor, is the media considered an essential service? I know it's a tough question to be asking, but and do we fall under the 50% umbrella?
That is a very good question. We have to ponder that. I think, are they an essential service? Depends who you would ask. I personally consider it an essential service, but I don't know if that's a global definition.
Dr. Zucker, are you investigating a cluster in Borough Park, Brooklyn?
We've heard about that, and we're looking into that.
Do you believe it is a cluster, or do you believe it's a result of testing?
Well, there's two possibilities. There's a lot of testing that's going on, or potentially one or multiple individuals that have been infected. So that's something that's new on the radar, and we're investigating it today.
Governor, Westchester was the epicenter. It's sort of moved now to New York City. When you talk about expanding the capability of hospitals, is Westchester an area where you're looking at perhaps opening some new temporary facility, and can you describe where those might be at this point?
Definitely. Our planning will track, again, it's science, it's data, will track where the cases are. So wherever you have a cluster of cases, that's where you want to add to the capacity. You look at how many beds you now have, how many beds you may need, and that's where you add to the capacity. New York City is the natural area for it to increase because of the density. Westchester was an anomaly, that whole New Rochelle situation. And look, we responded to it dramatically, and I want to thank the Westchester County Executive, George Latimer, who's done a great job. But we'll increase the capacity in Westchester, that cluster, and New York City. We also have a cluster in Nassau now. So wherever we see these clusters pop up.
It's a 50% rule of fight. It's just New York State. We didn't get agreement from neighboring governors.
I have not spoken to them about it at this time to a point where we have agreement. Our numbers are somewhat worse. We don't yet have agreement with Connecticut, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. But again, on this mandate, this one is not really geographically specific because a business can't pick up today and move to New Jersey to get around the mandate.
How fast are you looking to move on the state budget?
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Not even the prospect of $1,000 checks to individuals was able to stop Wall Street's continued slide for long. Losses of 5 to 6.5% wiping out yesterday's gains. The Dow down 1,382 points. The Nasdaq 372. The S&P 155. And oil prices are sliding downward even faster, trading now below $23 a barrel by 15 cents. It's a 15% drop on word from Saudi Arabia that it plans to keep oil production levels ramped up for the next.
Doing our job. If they want to come up and do the budget early, fine. Otherwise, and criminal justice experts talking about bail reform.
Can you give us an update?
This morning, I had that meeting this morning, sir.
Can you give us an update on New Rochelle, and is there any evidence that the containment zone in effect in that city has been effective?
You want to speak to that, doctor?
Well, we are still tracking cases in that area, in the whole Westchester County, but we do believe that the effectiveness of decreasing numbers is happening with them.
Yeah, but certain things are inarguable. It is inarguable, but to the extent you reduce density, you reduce the transfer of the virus. That is inarguable. So closing schools, closing gatherings, that is inarguable.
Sick leave bill is expected to be voted on today and passed. Do you expect to sign that today? And it's supposed to be...
As soon as they pass the bill, I'll sign it.
When would people start benefiting from that?
The quarantine bill goes into effect immediately, right?
The quarantine bill goes into effect immediately. The larger paid sick bill we're actually going to hold on and do in the budget, and that'll come into effect in 180 days.
Would people be getting checks from their employer as potentially next week, or
if
whenever?
they're in mandatory quarantine or if they're in precautionary quarantine, it goes into effect immediately.
The governor, why amend that bill? Because obviously what was introduced yesterday had the statewide.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The puck drops.
12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, the president thought he could defeat the narrative of COVID-19 with his usual tactic of, quote, censorship through noise. But the virus is proving resistant.
People's lives are going to be disrupted on a daily basis, and as that happens, the alternate reality he's created is inevitably going to implode.
Catch On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
Right, but do you have any plans should, the NYPD need to cut hours? Or, as we saw in Philadelphia, they relaxed certain, they told officers to stop detaining people for certain crimes. So
I'll leave that to the local police departments unless there's a situation that requires state action. But right now, we're leaving it to the local police departments.
Governor, could you please expand more on your discussions on bail reform with the DAs and the criminal justice experts?
We spoke to the issue. There's a divergence of opinion. I said to them that I'm very proud of what we did on bail reform. I think we made a significant difference. Obviously, there's people who have different opinions on what needs to be done now. And it was just a general conversation without a conclusion. It will be concluded in the budget. Let's take one more question, and then we'll get to work.
You mentioned that 108 people have been released from the hospital, and maybe this is a question for Dr. Zucker. Are those people out of the woods? Can you get coronavirus twice, or have they built up an immunity?
So you do build up an immunity to all viruses. Sometimes immunity lasts for years, sometimes for your lifetime. And they are out of the woods. I mean, if they've recovered, that's a positive finding.
Doctor, you gave this this conversation I had with my sister. If you take your daughter to get a coronavirus test and she tests positive, what do you think happens? They send you home and they say chicken soup and take care of yourself. And if it gets worse and you need hospitalization, call me. So getting the test and getting the result, all it really does is inform us to isolate that person so that person doesn't transfer it. But there's no medicine that you get for the coronavirus, right? It's just like a flu. The body has to develop its own immunity. Medicine that you get for the coronavirus, right? It's just like a flu. The body has to develop its own immunity to that virus. We've been doing this testing just to slow the spread. And again, it's what I said to my sister. Keep her away from mom. Don't go into a nursing home. Don't go into a senior care facility. Don't expose a person who's immune compromised, who's recovering from cancer, who has emphysema, who has a respiratory illness. That's all this is. We're going to go to work. Thank you very much.
We've been listening to Governor Andrew Cuomo of the state of New York as he's been giving a live press briefing explaining that the case has gone up by about 1,000 since yesterday in the state of New York, and that he's not going to absolutely clamp down on people working from work, but he's going to put a 50% restriction on, and he may go to 100% before we're done here. He's been giving regular news conferences basically explaining where we stand and what needs to be done. And now we turn to John Tucker. John? Okay, we will not go to John Tucker yet, but we will, I promise you, before we're done with the program. In the meantime, let's go to Kriti Gupta. She is Bloomberg Markets Live reporter, and she has been covering the markets, which are having another rough day, Kriti.
That's right. We're seeing still major sell-offs in the major indices. S&P down now 5%, worse down as low as a 6%. We were getting in that territory where we were worried about a potential trading halt there. Something to keep in mind, though, is that the real story is in the currency markets. You're seeing some major dollar strength here, sending the pound and the Norwegian krona actually to some record low levels here. What you want to keep in mind, though, is that this is a funding squeeze. Everyone is trying to hoard dollars right now because that seems to be the safest way to hop into the treasury market.
It doesn't look like that's the only thing investors like today are dollars. The dollar's going up, but other than that, they don't want any of it. They don't want bonds. They certainly don't want oil. They don't want equities.
It's funny. We're kind of seeing a move through the asset classes of where people kind of want to put their money and where they want to invest. We started off with stocks, of course, switching to treasuries, seeing those margin calls on gold, and now really moving into the currency market as the way to kind of play the virus. So there's some interesting moves there, as well as across the sector, seeing moves into the defensives. Of course, no surprise there as we get this kind of risk-off sentiment on the macro level.
Okay, thank you so much to Kriti Gupta. And now I'm told John Tucker is with us, and we've been waiting for you, John. It's worth the wait.
And I've been waiting for you. Yeah, firmly in the red right now. The Dow 6% lower, S&P 500 down 5%. And I wanted to bring you this, some economic news. As efforts to contain the virus intensify, the number of Americans filed for unemployment benefits is skyrocketing, David. Take, for example, Connecticut. About 30,000 claims have been filed since Friday. This is 10 times the average weekly total, was according to the Hartford Courant. Ohio, take them for example. They received more than 4,800 applications over the past couple of days. So we are starting to see the economic impact showing up in the high-frequency data. Now, we do have movement in the Treasury market. The 10-year yield right now is at 1.09%. That is down 6/32. So the yield up just slightly right now. As we look at oil, it is being battered. NYMEX crude, $22.70 a barrel today. That is a almost a 16% decline in today's trading activity. And dollar strength today. Where do you go when all the usual havens are disrupted? A seventh day of dollar strength. And of course, we'll check the markets for you every 15 minutes, and as warranted in these crazy times, as the volatility index is above 75 right now. David, back to you.
Wow, 75. Thank you so much to John Tucker. Let's come back now to Kriti Gupta as we continue to wait for that coronavirus task force briefing. It was originally scheduled for 11:30, and now we're afternoon, but they still have the press waiting for them there. They have not come out as yet. So Kriti, are there any safe havens, or at least safer havens here? I mean, in healthcare, in consumer staples, for example, as people hunker down at home, they need to buy a lot of things.
Well, that's the question of the day, and that's why you're seeing, I think, volatility so much, because those traditional safe haven bids really don't exist anymore. And what's crucial here is kind of where in the markets can you really hide out across asset classes? Like I said before, John Tucker was talking to us, we were talking about the dollar funding squeeze. I mean, that seems to be the new safe asset. The other kind of things I've heard is just people pulling out. Cash is king right now, especially for those longer term investors. As for the short term, it's just kind of getting in and out of positions as quickly as you can.
And one outfit that's pulling out a lot is the Fed. I mean, we had the Fed last night, then again today, take various steps, try to open up discount windows to say we'll take securities as security for some loans to the banks, things like that. They're doing what they can to try to maintain at least liquidity.
That's right, and the Fed is really pulling out all the stops here. I mean, this is what we were kind of clamoring for. When I say we, I mean the market. It was really what we were clamoring for at the beginning of these virus headlines. We needed a combination of monetary stimulus and fiscal stimulus. It seems like they're delivering on both fronts, but we're still not really seeing it kind of jumpstart the market here. And the reason for that is, although we are seeing, of course, the Fed address those liquidity concerns, especially on the front end with that commercial paper facility, is that there is kind of a duality here. As we see them make major moves, they're also admitting that we need those major moves, and that kind of sends off some red alarms as well.
One of the benefits of Kriti Gupta is she watches basically all the markets. Give us a sense on credit. What's going on with credit? Where's the spreads? Both for high yield, but also even for investment grade. Where are we doing that? Because it has been under a lot of stress and strain.
That's right. And credit is fascinating right now, especially with the oil market really kind of going into trouble here. We are seeing the Bloomberg Barclays high yield average trading at 846 basis points here. That is the spread, of course, on high yield to treasuries. Crucial now when we do see those kind of U.S. shale companies that make up a good chunk of the index really coming under pressure off those oil headlines as well. So something certainly to keep in mind, but also because in the broader credit market, when you see oil prices low like this, that is a deflationary move for the broader economy. So you could actually see that kind of trickle into other markets as well. Right now, though, we need to keep an eye on just how much risk are people taking. Are we starting to see these companies come out and potentially refinance? That's what we'll keep our eye on.
Well, you saw that with Verizon and others. Now we're going to go immediately to the White House. Thank you, Critty, for the daily briefing for the coronavirus task force.
By announcing some important developments in our war against the Chinese virus. We'll be invoking the Defense Production Act just in case we need it. In other words, I think you all know what it is, and it can do a lot of good things if we need it, and we will have it all completed, signing it in just a little while, right after I'm finished with this conference. I'll be signing it. It's prepared to go. So we will be invoking the Defense Production Act. Last week I signed an emergency declaration under the Stafford Act, which, as you know, we invoked previously, and which activated FEMA's National Response Coordination Center. FEMA now is fully engaged at the highest levels. Today, FEMA is activated in every region. We are at level one being the highest level, which we will work with, and we've been working with FEMA. I've done a lot of work with FEMA. They're incredible. It's always been on hurricanes or tornadoes. They're right now in Tennessee, a large group working in Tennessee have been incredible. That was a tragic event. Alabama last year, also a tornado, and then obviously the numerous hurricanes in different locations that were, in some cases, very devastating, and in every case, FEMA came through. This is a very different kind of a work for FEMA, but they will come through, as they always do. We have tremendous people, tremendous talent in FEMA. We're sending, upon request, the 2 hospital ships. They're being prepared right now. They're massive ships. They're the big white ships with the Red Cross on the sides. One is called the Mercy and the other is called the Comfort, and they are in tip-top shape. They soon will be. They're getting ready to come up to New York. I spoke with Governor Cuomo about it. He's excited about it. And I also, we haven't made the final determination as to where it's going to go on the West Coast. The Comfort is located now in San Diego, and it's going to be, we'll be picking the destination fairly shortly. So those 2 ships are being prepared to go, and they can be launched over the next week or so, depending on need. Earlier this week, the first clinical trial of the vaccine candidate for the virus began in Washington State, as you probably know. The genetic sequence of the virus was first published in January, but thanks to the unprecedented partnership between the FDA, NIH, and the private sector, we've reached human trials for the vaccine just 8 weeks later. That's a record by many, many months. It used to take years to do this, and now we did it just in a very short while. That's the fastest development in history of what we're doing with regard to the vaccine. We're making very, very big progress. Today I can announce further steps to expand testing capacity. We're working with several groups to determine if the self-swab, a much easier process than the current process that's not very nice to do, I can tell you, because I did it. But we have a current process that's a little bit difficult. If you have it done, the groups are working on determining if a self-swab by an individual is as effective as the other. The other is very effective, very accurate. But we're going to see if we can do a self-swab, which is would be a lot more popular, I can tell you that. So, and that would be administered also by a health official, but it would be a lot easier to do. The fact is that the health professionals would free up a lot. Let me just say, the self-swab is what it is. It's a self-swab. You do it yourself. The other has to be issued by a health professional, and it's something that is quite difficult. And we think it's working out for the self-swab. And if it would test positive, the people would go and they would do what they have to do. But we think that's probably working out. I've asked the FDA to cut through the red tape and reduce regulatory barriers. We are looking at some very exciting things, and I'm going to be holding a second news conference either today. We're going to talk about the FDA. Some things are happening that are quite exciting, and We're going to be doing that either later today or tomorrow, fairly early tomorrow. So we'll see what happens. But the FDA, my instructions is I've been working very, very hard on a number of developments, and we'll be discussing them with you later today or tomorrow. And this afternoon, I'll be meeting with nurses on the front lines of the battle against the virus. They're truly American heroes. They want to get it done. They're incredible people. So we're going to be meeting with nurses, and I actually look forward to that. They're very brave. They're taking a lot of risk, and they have done an incredible job, and they never complain. Today I'm also announcing that the Department of Housing and Urban Development is providing immediate relief to renters and homeowners by suspending all foreclosures and evictions until the end of April. So we're working very closely with Dr. Ben Carson and everybody from HUD. Every generation of Americans has been called to make shared sacrifices for the good of the nation. In World War II, young people in their teenage years volunteered to fight. They wanted to fight so badly because they love our country. Workers refused to go home and slept on factory floors to keep assembly lines running. And, you know, the numbers of ships that they built during World War II to this day has nothing like that has ever been equal. They were doing ships literally on a daily basis. Nobody's ever seen anything like it. To this day, nobody's seen anything like that, what they were able to do during World War II. And now it's our time. We must sacrifice together because we are all in this together, and we'll come through together. It's the invisible enemy. That's always the toughest enemy, the invisible enemy. But we're going to defeat the invisible enemy. I think we're going to do it even faster than we thought. And it will be a complete victory. It'll be a total victory. So we'll have a second conference, again, having to do with the FDA and this. I think it's going to be potentially a very exciting news conference, and we will do it as quickly as we can, so whether it's today or tomorrow. And I'll, with that, ask Mike Pence to say a few words, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. President. The White House Coronavirus Task Force met this morning, and now that we have cases in all 50 states, we're continuing to move out on the President's call to bring the full resources of the federal government, a full partnership with every state and territory, the full power of the American economy to support businesses and families. As the President says to us and every day, we'll do whatever it takes. We're all in this together. Yesterday, the President met with the tourism industry executives and also had an engaging discussion with all the top companies in our industrial and medical supply chain. The President, as you all are aware, also announced today that by mutual consent, the northern border to Canada will be closed to non-essential travel. This does not include essential travel or the transit of goods, but it was through mutual discussion that took place this morning between the President and Prime Minister Trudeau, and the Department of Homeland Security will be effectuating that decision. The President spoke with some of the nation's top business leaders today, again, to speak about the supply chain in the country. For our part, we're going to be conducting a conference call later today with state and local health officials to renew our ongoing commitment of cooperation and collaboration. As the President said last week in signing the Stafford Act, he stood up the National Response Coordination Center, and today at the President's direction, FEMA has gone to level 1. FEMA's mission is to support disasters that are locally executed, state managed, and federally supported. And tomorrow, the President will be hosting all the nation's governors from a video conference at FEMA to ensure that they have full connection to all of the activated regions for FEMA going forward. With regard to testing, I'm pleased to report that we're increasing the number of tests being performed by the thousands every day, thanks to the public-private partnership that President Trump forged with commercial laboratories around the country. Our health experts tell us to remind every American, it's important to remember, people without symptoms should not get tested. We want to make sure that the supply of testing is there for those that need it most or are symptomatic or in the vulnerable population. Dr. Deborah Birx in a moment will address the progress that we're making on testing, the infection rate, our recommendations to every America, as well as some important new findings about the impact on youth that we're gaining from data that's coming in from Europe that'll be important to every American. On the subject of supplies, the President has our task force extremely focused. As the President mentioned mentioned that he's invoking the Defense Production Act today. Secretary Esper in a few moments will describe the ongoing efforts that the Department of Defense is taking to make medical resources available. Secretary Robert Wilkie will announce decisions the VA has made to expand hospital capacity within their system. Also, with regard to medical personnel, at the President's direction, HHS is issuing a regulation today that will allow all doctors and medical professionals to practice across state lines to meet the needs of hospitals that may arise in adjoining areas. In addition to that, we are again today asking every American and our medical community leaders and hospitals to partner with us in delaying elective procedures across the country in our healthcare system to ensure that medical supplies and medical capacity go where they're needed most. Seema Verma will describe guidance that CMS will be issuing on that front. And finally, I want to remind every American of the President's 15-day guidance to slow the spread. We are grateful for members of the media and the general public that are adhering to these, sharing them with neighbors and friends. All of our experts continue to believe that if every American will do their part and embrace and put into practice these principles, that we can significantly limit the reach of the coronavirus in the weeks and months ahead. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Dr. Birx, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, Mr. Vice President. So, we continue to look at data every single day. There are concerning reports coming out of France and Italy about some young people getting seriously ill and very seriously ill in the ICUs. We think part of this may be that people heeded the early data coming out of China and coming out of South Korea that the elderly or those with pre-existing medical conditions were at particular risk. It may have been that the millennial generation, our largest generation, our future generation that will carry us through for the next multiple decades, there may be disproportional number of infections among that group. And so even if it's a rare occurrence, it may be seen more frequently in that group and be evident now. So we're looking at that information very carefully. We have not seen any significant mortality in the children, but we are concerned about the early reports coming out of Italy and France. So again, I'm going to call on that generation that's part of that group that brought us innovation, particularly throughout all of their ability to look around corners and skip through games. I always went level by level. I didn't realize that you could go from level 3 to level 7. That's what they've taught us. They look for things that we don't see. We need them to be healthy. So again, not only calling on you to heed what's in the guidance, but to really ensure that each and every one of you are protecting each other. And so we cannot have these large gatherings that continue to occur throughout the country for people who are off work to then be socializing in large groups and spreading the virus. You have the potential then to spread it to someone who does have a condition that none of us knew about and cause them to have a disastrous outcome. Finally, on the testing piece and what we're learning, I know last week in bringing the private sector, I think what has been exciting to me over the last 2.5 weeks is to see this administration harness the full capacity of the private sector, understanding that a lot of our solutions that we need to confront this virus rely on the private sector. Bringing the private sector commercial labs was critical into this process. We are now beginning to see that they have spread out in a prioritized way because we asked them to prioritize the regions that were mostly affected. And so you still may have difficulty getting tests in areas that do not have significant cases. We've had them prioritize the regions where we need diagnosis and their diagnostic percent. Remember I told you South Korea was under 4%, so 96% of people were negative. The last report we've seen from the laboratories have about a 7+% positivity rate. Still, 93+% or 92% are negative. But I think that's encouraging to me personally that we're prioritizing appropriately to those areas that have the greatest need. Today and yesterday, Thermo Fisher pushed out most of their laboratory testing capacity, and that will dramatically increase that platform and the ability to run additional tests in addition to Roche. So I appreciate everybody's attention to these numbers. I'm excited that we've prioritized where the need was the greatest, but again, please follow the guidance and please make sure in every report that you're putting out that you're talking about the presidential guidance to actually stop the spread of this virus. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah, very much. Mark, please.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. President. So good afternoon, everyone, and I want to provide an update on DOD's coronavirus efforts as we continue to focus on our three priorities. That's, first of all, protecting our personnel and their families. Second, safeguarding our national security mission capabilities. And third, of course, supporting the administration's whole-of-government approach. First of all, though, I do want to assure the American people that the United States military remains ready and capable of defending the country and our interests abroad. Now, with that, the Department is leaning forward in our response to COVID-19. We have issued international and domestic travel restrictions to all DoD personnel and families that should dramatically reduce potential exposure to the virus. Those have been in place for some time now. As I announced yesterday, the Department of Defense will make available up to 5 million N95 respirator masks and other personal protective equipment from our own strategic reserves to the Department of Health and Human Services for distribution. The first 1 million masks will be available immediately. We're also prepared to distribute to HHS up to 2,000 operational deployable ventilators for use as needed. Yesterday, I was at Fort Detrick, Maryland, which is probably the military's premier research institute, where I got updated on the incredible work our people are doing as part of the interagency team to work on vaccines and therapeutics. They are making great progress there. We also have announced that we've certified our 16th lab, or will soon certify our 16th lab to help with processing tests from across the country. Additionally, I have directed, as the President mentioned, that the hospital ships Mercy and Comfort be prepared to deploy to increase the nation's medical capacity. And we have also alerted a variety of field and expeditionary hospitals to be prepared to deploy as well as needed, based on direction from the Commander-in-Chief. Today, leadership from the Army Corps of Engineers is in New York, meeting with Governor Cuomo and his team. I spoke with Governor Cuomo yesterday, and other governors. I will be speaking to more in the coming days to make sure that they know what DoD can provide through our system to address their needs. In my conversations with governors and members of Congress about DoD's resources, I've made it clear that we will continue to support the administration's comprehensive efforts and the country every step of the way while ensuring our nation's security remains the top priority. I want to conclude by thanking again all of our service members and their families who have been affected by this outbreak. They are all great heroes. We are continuing to support them throughout this. We are all in this together. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. So yesterday, the President made a very important announcement about telehealth, and this is allowing our 62 million seniors to be able to get some medical services from the safety of their home, reducing their risk and without any copays. But we're also making sure that the healthcare system is prepared and that those on the front lines have the support that they need. The reality is the stakes are high, and we need to preserve personal protective equipment for those that are on the front lines of this fight. And to that end, we have put out guidelines over the last 2 weeks to expand the types of masks that can be used in routine care and saving those N95s for the most risky situations. Conserving personal protective equipment is also essential to combat the virus. So today, CMS will announce detailed recommendations to further promote this needed conservation, specifically by limiting non-essential elective medical and surgical procedures, including dental procedures. We believe that these recommendations will help surgeons, patients, and hospitals prioritize what is essential while leaving the ultimate decision in the hands of state and local health officials and those clinicians who have direct responsibility to their patients. And we urge providers and clinicians and patients to seriously consider these recommendations. They will not only preserve equipment, but it also allows doctors and nurses to help those that are on the front lines. And it'll protect patients from unnecessary exposure to the virus. We fully appreciate that this is going to have a major impact on the healthcare system, but the shared sacrifice is essential to help those that are on the front lines. And I want to thank the medical societies such as the American College of Surgeons and the American Dental Association that took a proactive approach and already posted these recommendations. And we've also talked to the American Medical Association, and they have fully indicated their support for this recommendation. We now invite the entire healthcare community to join us in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Robert, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. My instructions from the President were very clear. I was to do everything imaginable as aggressively as possible to protect the 9.5 million veterans who are part of the Department of Veterans Affairs. Last month, we established 19 emergency operations centers across the country. We began to limit the number of visitors who entered our facilities. We began, I think, we were the first system to begin triaging across the country in our 170 hospitals the entrance of anyone into our facility without being questioned or tested. We expanded those restrictions to those in our 135 community living centers, which have about 7,800 veterans who are in acute conditions, to make sure that they were protected. We also took the next step and made sure that we limited the dental surgeries that we were provided. We've cut back by 1/3 the number of routine appointments we have had, and we have canceled elective surgeries. These were all part of the President's directive to be as aggressive in a public health sense as we could be. And I think we have set the pace for the entire country. I will say, we've often said that we work the most noble mission in the federal government. Our veterans have been in the toughest spots in the world. They have been put in conditions that are unimaginable to most Americans, and they have responded. They have responded clearly. They have responded with passion, and also the 400,000 members of our department who are out there on the front lines. The last thing I will say is that you've heard a lot about the fourth mission that VA has. Our first three missions are health care, benefits, and memorial affairs. Our fourth mission is to support the federal government in times of natural disasters and pandemics. We are the buttress force in case that FEMA or HHS calls upon us to deploy medical professionals across the country to meet crises. We plan for that every day. We are gaming out emergency preparedness scenarios, and we stand ready when the President needs us to expand our mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. Thank you. Thank you all. That's very nice. Any questions, please?
Thank you. Two questions, if I may. Your Treasury Secretary was on Capitol Hill talking about the potential for what could come, and he said that unemployment could skyrocket to 20%. Are we looking that could rival the Great Depression? Are we looking at potentially historic
I don't agree
devastation?
with that. Yeah, no, I don't agree. That's a absolute total worst case scenario. But no, we don't look at that at all.
And thank you. And my second question.
We're nowhere near it.
Okay, why do you keep calling this the Chinese virus? There are reports of dozens of incidents of bias against Chinese Americans in this country. Your own aide, Secretary Azar, says he does not use this term. He says ethnicity does not cause the virus. Why do you keep using this? A lot of people say it's racist.
It's not racist at all. No, not at all. It comes from China. That's why. Comes from China. I want to be accurate.
About Chinese Americans
please,
in
John.
This country.
Please.
The aides behind you. Are you comfortable with this term?
I have great love for all of the people from our country. But as you know, China tried to say at one point, maybe they stopped now, that it was caused by American soldiers. That can't happen. It's not going to happen. Not as long as I'm president. It comes from China. John, please.
Two questions, if I could, Mr. President. First of all, in the Defense Procurement Act, you're invoking it today. Senator Schumer said
on the floor a short time ago that it urgently needs to be put into action to produce medical supplies, particularly ventilators. Do you have some targets that you would like to see immediately spooled up under the act?
We have tremendous numbers of ventilators, but there's never been an instance like this where no matter what you have, it's not enough. That would be the case. And we will be, it's being signed. It's essentially drawn, and I'm going to sign it in just a little while. If we need to use it, we'll be using it at full speed ahead.
Sorry, you said it's urgently needed to be used. Do you have some targets?
Well, we're going to know whether or not urgent, but we will, we do have targets. We have targets for certain pieces of equipment. We have targets for masks. The masks, the numbers of masks are incredible. We've ordered millions of them, but we need millions more. A thing like this has never been requested, and we've never had to even think in terms of these numbers, but we need millions of masks, and all of that will be ordered. We need respirators. We need ventilators is a big thing because it's a complex piece of equipment. So we have a lot of ventilators, but we're going to be ordering more.
And second question, what size will the checks be that will be sent out to them?
To be determined. We're working with the Senate right now. We're working with everybody on Capitol Hill. There's been tremendous, there really has been, with some exceptions, obviously, because it's always the way it is, but there has been, they've been getting along very well, Republicans and Democrats. It's a nice thing, very bipartisan, so forth.
Would you like to see them more than $1,000?
Well, we're going to see. I don't want to get into that right now, John. We are looking at different numbers. We're looking at timing that would be different, splitting the time, splitting the payments. We're looking at a lot of different things. Hasn't been determined yet, but it will shortly be determined, and people want to go big as opposed. Everybody seems to want to go big, and they want to get to the recovery. The big day is, the big thing we can do is get rid of this horrible, I call it the unseen enemy. You call it, there's 1,000 different terms for it, but whatever, it snuck up on us. And it did 128 countries. I think it's in something like that, very close to that. Think of that. So it spreads violently. It's a very contagious, very, very contagious virus.
Do you consider America to be on a wartime footing in terms of fighting this virus?
I do. I actually do. I'm looking at it that way because, if it got out of control, the big thing we did was a very early stoppage of people coming in who could be very, very heavily infected. That was a very good move, and it was very early, very, very early, when most people, including a lot of professionals, they didn't want us to do it. That really saved a lot of lives, and I look at it, I view it as in a sense, a wartime president. That's what we're fighting. It's a very tough situation. You have to do things. You have to close parts of an economy that 6 weeks ago were the best they've ever been. We had the best economy we've ever had. And then one day you have to close it down in order to defeat this enemy. But we're doing it, and we're doing it well. And I'll tell you, the American people have been incredible. For the most part, they've been really incredible. Yeah, please, Caitlin.
For you, and then I have one for Secretary Wilkie as well, but I'll start with you. You just said there are a tremendous number of ventilators that we have, but for weeks, hospitals have been warned about a critical shortage that they say we are not prepared for. So why did it take so long to invoke the Defense Production Act?
Well, hospitals are supposed to have ventilators, too. And when we have thousands of ventilators, it sounds like a lot, but this is a very unforeseen thing. Nobody ever thought of these numbers. Nobody ever saw numbers like this. Even with regard to testing, normally we wouldn't be doing testing, and they decided to do it. Very, very hard to ramp up. Now we're getting highly sophisticated tests, and it's going very well, but nobody's ever heard of testing in the kind of quantities that you're talking about.
But we knew for weeks we needed more ventilators, so why did it take so long?
Well, we knew. It depends. It depends on how it goes. Worst case, absolutely. Best case, not at all. So we're going to have to see where it goes, but we are ordering thousands and thousands of ventilators, and they're complex. These are complex machines, and but we're ordering them. Does anybody have a mic? Maybe you do. How many do we have?
Yeah, you said
and we're ordering. Please, please. Do you know the number?
We have a specific number of ventilators in the stockpile. It's in excess of 10,000, and you just heard the announcement from the Department of Defense. They'll be adding several more thousand to that. But the President, even this morning and yesterday afternoon, speaking with the largest companies in the supply chain of this country, we're hearing a tremendous spirit among industry leaders who are ready to step in and add to that volume. The stockpiles don't count all of the ventilators that exist today in the marketplace and in healthcare facilities around the country. But the president's given us a directive to make sure that our stockpile, but just as importantly, working with industry leaders, that we're securing the increase in ventilators, the increase in masks, gloves, eye protective care, garments that are all necessary to lean forward. And we're confident we'll be able to accomplish that with the incredible cooperation of the supply chain that exists in America today.
But we don't have an exact number for nationwide, how many ventilators we have?
We can give you that exact number. We'll give it to you. But we're ordering a lot more.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead in the back.
Question for the VA Secretary. I have one question.
Yeah, 1 second. 1 second, Caitlin. We'll do it in a second.
Okay.
You'll be able to.
Two questions, Mr. President. Thank you.
Yes.
The first one on the Canadian border. What was the tipping point? Friday we talked about it, and Monday you said no, we're not considering closing.
No, I said not yet. I spoke with the Prime Minister, Trudeau. Very good relationship, obviously, between us and our two countries, and no tipping point. It's just that we want to isolate from the standpoint we don't want people coming into contact, because that's the way we're going to win this war. That is so important, and we both thought it was time. Now, it's not affecting trade. It's non-essential. It's non-essential crossings. It won't affect trade at all, and it was just something we thought would be good for both countries. Yes, please.
Second question, Mr. President. How can you be sure that trade is not going to be a vector of the virus? How can you be sure that trade and everything that's being shipped from one side?
Well, they're doing it in a very careful manner. You can only be vigilant and very professional, but it's not pertaining at this moment to trade between the two countries. Yeah, please.
We are hearing that the $1 trillion economic stimulus package could look something like $50 billion for the airlines, $150 billion in loan guarantees for critical sectors of the economy, a $250 billion payment on April 6th directly to individuals, another $250 billion payment on May 18th, again, directly to individuals, and as well $300 billion for small business loan guarantees. Is that, in the general sense, what you're looking at?
It could be, and we're also playing with a lot of numbers, a lot of very big numbers, and a lot of very small numbers, frankly. We want to take care. We have to help everybody. It was nobody's fault. This happened. I mean, some people could say it was somebody's fault, actually. But it was nobody's fault, and certainly none of these companies that all of a sudden had no passengers in planes and had no passengers on cruise ships and all of the things that have happened. But I will say that they can't be blamed for this, and we want to keep those companies vibrant, because there's going to be a comeback very, very quickly as soon as this is solved, and it will be solved. We will win, and there will be a comeback, and it'll take place very quickly.
$250 billion. There's give or take 330 million Americans or so. If you just do the math on that, that's about $750 a person. A family of four, that would be about $3,000 on average. Again, rough math. Which is that where this is headed?
Well, no, I don't want to say that, because it's a moving. These are all every number that you mentioned. Yes, we've talked about those numbers. We're also moving those numbers in both directions. So we'll let you know. It's moving along fast. Again, there's a great bipartisan effort going on that I haven't really seen before to this extent.
On the cell swab that you mentioned at the beginning of this, has the FDA approved that test?
No, they're looking at it. It's down the line, and they're looking at it very seriously. And I think it would be a great thing, because the others, to use a nice word, it's very inconvenient. It's very tough.
For you, sir. You tweeted this morning about your approval rating amongst Republicans. You have said that you give yourself a 10 in terms of handling this crisis. How do you reassure Americans at home who don't trust you to handle a crisis of this magnitude?
Well, I think we're doing a really good job. We started off with a termination of the border, the people coming in from China, where this all started. That meant I took it very seriously. And when I use the word calm doesn't mean that I'm not taking it seriously. Calm means, and we should be calm. We should be extremely calm. But, 95% within the Republican Party and over 50%. And I also have, we have very great approval numbers. I mean, people like the job that we're doing. And when you compare this to other epidemics, or if you want to use a different term, you can, but within this country, and you look at what's happened over the years, this is being handled very, very professionally. We have the greatest professionals in the world. We're doing a good job. Nobody's ever been swamped like this. Nothing's been so contagious. The level of contagion has been incredible, actually. Nobody's seen anything quite like this. Yeah, Peter, go ahead.
If I can ask you about the tests, sir, for a second. If federal officials have shipped millions of tests, as you and your colleagues have said, why, as the federal government says, have only 59,000 tests been processed to this point? We just heard from the Atlanta public health director saying that they have fewer than 50 test kits for more than 900,000 citizens.
Yeah,
Where are the
well,
tests?
I'll let Mike answer that. Deborah.
So that's a very critical question, and thank you for asking it. So the test kits that we put out last week through the approval, the rapid movement of that meeting that President Trump called less than 2 weeks ago, that has resulted in bringing our private sector to the table, because the tests in the platform that was out there could only run between 4 and 12 tests per platform per day. We've now moved into platforms that can run basically tens of thousands of tests per day. So the reason I'm grateful for your question, because it allows me to point out that, of course, then there was backlog. There were individuals who had been tested who hadn't had their specimen run because of the slow throughput. It's now in a high-speed platform. So we will see the number of people diagnosed dramatically increase over the next 4 to 5 days. I know some of you will use that to raise an alarm that we are worse than Italy because of our slope of our curve. To every American out there, it will be 5 to 6 days worth of tests being run in 24 to 48 hours. So our curves will not be stable until sometime next week. The reason I talked about Thermo Fisher yesterday is because their platform is in 2,000 laboratories. They're the ones that are putting out the 1 million tests this week that will solve the issue that Atlanta and others have brought up. I wanted to be clear. We prioritize the areas. We do county by county analyses. Based on those analyses on what counties had more than 50 cases, we prioritize the test kits we put out, the 400,000. And that's why we're seeing a 7% plus positivity rate. We'll be able to expand that platform and reprioritize based on the accessibility of the other kits.
Mr. President, perhaps I could follow up. How are non-symptomatic professional athletes getting tests while others are waiting in line and can't get them? Do the well-connected go to the front of the line?
Well, you'd have to ask them that question. I mean,
Should that happen?
I've read. No, I wouldn't say so, but perhaps that's been the story of life. That does happen on occasion, and I've noticed where some people have been tested fairly quickly. Look, we inherited
a very... encourage them to defer their tests to others?
Excuse me. We inherited a very obsolete system. This was a system that was out of date, obsolete, or it was a system that was never meant to take care of the kind of quantity, the number of people that we're talking about, millions and millions of people. If you go back in years past, like even recently with the flu, nobody had tests before. They didn't test the entire nation to see whether or not they had flu. They got the flu, they got better. Hopefully they got better, that was it. Now all of a sudden they do this very complex testing. What we've done is we've broken it down, we've broken up the system, but it was obsolete, and or you could say it was also a system that just wasn't meant to handle the kind of volume that you're talking about. We've rebuilt it into a system that for the future will be a very good system if you want to go this route. But this was never done before, and I would imagine it will be done in the future, but we built it into a very good system by using private companies, the great private companies, and I have to say Roche has been doing a very good job. They're doing a lot of work, a very good job. But this was an obsolete system. This was not a system that was meant to do anything like this or even near this. John?
President, a couple of things. A major trade coalition is calling on you to suspend tariffs with other countries as part of the response to the coronavirus.
Who heads that group? Those countries do, probably.
No, it's an American free trade.
I know. I'm sure of free trade. Look, China's paying us billions and billions of dollars in tariffs, and there's no reason to do that. They haven't even spoken to me about that. China hasn't asked me to do that, but we're getting billions of dollars a year from tariffs from China, and I can't imagine Americans asking for that, but it could be that China will ask for a suspension or something. We'll see what happens. China's having a very rough time. They have their worst year in 76 years, as I understand it. They're having a very, very tough time, and then on top of it, this happened with the virus. But no, we're taking in billions of dollars a year in tariffs, and This was caused by something totally unrelated to tariffs.
And on asylum seekers and people who crossed the southern border illegally, are you planning to invoke 42 U.S.C. 265, which would allow you to prohibit entry of certain people?
The answer is yes.
And when will that happen?
Very soon. Probably today. Yes.
A question for you and then a question for Dr. Burke.
Yeah.
On the border, firstly, are there plans to fully shut the Mexican border? And what do you define as essential travel when it comes to the U.S.-Canadian border?
Well, I think essential is medical. We have military working together. We have industry working together. And again, it's not affecting trade. So things like that. But just leisurely, let's go to a restaurant and have dinner, which a lot of people do. They come both ways. They go in both directions. That kind of thing we have ended on a temporary basis. Yeah, please go ahead. Not close it. No, we're not going to close it. But we are invoking a certain provision that will allow us great latitude as to what we do.
May I ask
please?
two questions if I could?
Yeah, go ahead. You know what? Go ahead. Sure.
The Wall Street Journal. So I just wanted to clarify something, because just a week ago, you all were standing here telling us that unless you had sustained contact with somebody who was symptomatic for COVID-19, you really didn't need to worry. You told the president, the vice president, that if they shook hands with somebody who had this, if they took a photograph with somebody who had this, they didn't really need to worry. And yet, several days later, we're in a situation where people are being told, don't leave your houses. There are curfews saying you cannot walk alone at night after a certain time. Can you walk us through what seems like a very dramatic swing, a very dramatic disconnect from what we were hearing before to what we're hearing now?
So two things. We look at data all the time, and I know you're looking at the China and South Korea data. And when you look at China and South Korea data and you look what China and South Korea did, you can see that their curves are not only blunted outside of Wuhan, so the Chinese areas outside of Wuhan, blunted curve, and South Korea, blunted curve. If you look at their curve today, they're already on the far end of their epidemic curve. Of course, none of those countries are fully back to work, and so that's what we worry about too. Secondly, there was a series of scientific articles published, and I know you've seen them too, about surface contamination. I think none of us really understood the level of surface piece. So we're still working out how much is it by human-human transmission and how much is it by surface. And this is why those fundamental guidelines were put out that says don't expose yourself to surfaces outside the home. Basically, what those guidelines are is don't expose yourself to excess number of persons who could be asymptomatic and infected, and then the person-to-person contact, and don't expose yourself to surfaces that could have had the virus on it, for which on hard surfaces, I know we had the cardboard issue about shipping, hard surfaces, not shown in fabric as much or in cardboard, but hard surface transmission. These are issues that we haven't had to deal with before with the level of respiratory infections, and that's why we have this concern, and that's why the president put out the guidelines. And so it's to cover both of those pieces. That's all new science, all new models. I think many of you have the Imperial study available and looked at the impact of those. That's the first time those have been modeled as a comprehensive approach to mitigating an epidemic.
And Dr. Burks, yesterday...
Mr. President, what about money? Mr. President, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that the administration has looked at an executive order that would expand the use of investigational drugs against the virus, but that FDA scientists are warning that this could put patients at risk.
I haven't seen the article. No, I haven't seen the article. We are making a lot of progress therapeutically. I will say that, but I have not seen that article, no.
Mr. President, we've shut down non-essential travel to Canada. Are you considering shutting down all travel to blunt the spread of the virus? And we've heard from industries like the airlines who are seeking relief. What other industries or how exactly is your administration going to determine which industries and businesses?
Well, there are certain industries that people know. I mean, the airlines would be number one if you look at what's going on. They go from having the best year they've ever had to having no passengers because of what we've had to do in order to win this war. It's a war. And so, basically, what many of the industries are. What we want to do is we want to make sure they all stay together so that after the war is won, we can immediately go right back up to where we were and even beyond. I think we're going to go beyond where we were. And a lot of people are saying that, by the way. We're poised to do that. But we have to win the war first. Yeah, please, go ahead.
quickly to follow up on that, Treasury proposed $150 billion today for those industries, but their proposal doesn't detail which industries would get that money and how much. So aside from the airlines, which you just mentioned, what about the cruise industry, the hotels? How much of that money do you see them each year?
We're talking about all of it. Haven't detailed it yet. We have detailed it to senators and to members of the House. We have been talking about it, and we're coming up with numbers. Haven't gotten there yet. But certainly hotel industry, the cruise ship industry, the airlines, those are all prime candidates, absolutely.
On the northern border, sir, when you say
Which border?
The northern border,
Yeah.
when you say temporary, which is what you said in your tweet, does that mean 30 days?
I would say 30 days, and hopefully at the end of 30 days we'll be in great shape. Jeff, please.
Mr. President, I was struck by what Dr. Burke said about millennials and others perhaps not taking some of these warnings as seriously as you would like. Some of those people also seem to be your supporters and conservatives who may be quoting some of what you said at the beginning of this, comparing it to the flu. What is your message to them to really follow what you've been saying so far, and are you concerned that they're still listening maybe to some of your earlier comments rather than your more recent ones?
Well, I think my earlier comments are to be calm. I mean, I do want people to be calm because we're going to win this, and we're going to win it. It's just a question of time, and I wanted to go quickly. So based on the fact that I wanted to go quickly, I hope they just listen to what we've been saying over the last period of time. We don't want them gathering, and I see they do gather, including on beaches and including in restaurants, young people. They don't realize they're feeling invincible. I don't know if you felt invincible when you were very young, but they were feeling totally invincible or are feeling that way, but they don't realize that they can be carrying lots of bad things home to grandmother and grandfather and even their parents. So we want them to heed the advice. We mean the advice, and I think it's getting through. I do believe it's getting through, Jim.
If they're watching, what do you say to them if they're watching? Sorry.
If they're what?
I think there are a lot of them watching. A lot of these people at home, these young people.
Well, I think I just said it.
I was going to say, what do you say?
Heed the advice. Heed the advice. I just said, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Peter.
Mr. President, how long do you think this is going to wrap? Mr. President, how long do you think it's going to wrap?
We'll get you next, okay? Say it.
Thank you, Mr. President. In talking about China, you've been very clear about who you think is to blame or where the origin to blame for this virus is.
Not think. No. I don't think. I know where it came from. I don't know if you'd say China's to blame. Certainly we didn't get an early run on it. It would have been helpful if we knew about it earlier. But it comes from China. And it's not a question about that. Nobody's questioning that.
Senator Cotton is saying that they should be punished, in so many words, for inflicting this on the American people. Do you feel that way about it?
Well, I have a lot of respect for Tom Cotton, and I know exactly what he's been saying. And there are those people that say that. So we'll see what happens. Thank you. Go ahead. It's your turn. Go ahead. Please. He's been waiting a long time. Please. You've had your hand up so nicely for a long time. It's your time.
Thank you, sir. We've seen the Chinese government kick out reporters from the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, the Washington Post. What is your message to the Chinese when it comes to transparency at a moment when you still have reporters asking you questions here at the White House?
Yeah, I'm not happy to see it. I don't. I have my own disputes with all three of those media groups. I think you know that very well. But I don't like seeing that at all. I'm not happy about that at all. Yes, please.
You didn't correct the language, but I wonder if you agree with it. Do you believe that China is inflicting this upon our country?
No, I don't believe they're inflicting. I think they could have given us a lot earlier notice. Absolutely. Please. Go ahead, please. Go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. President. Your credibility ratings are very low. There was a recent NPR poll.
Who are you asking that question?
I'm asking
because I see that they're very high. You know, if you look, I'm 95% of the Republican Party. We just had a poll that was done by a very reputable group where I'm beating Sleepy Joe Biden by a lot in Florida, in the state of Florida, and in other states. So I don't really know who you're talking about. Jennifer, go ahead, please.
Two questions, if you're willing, sir. Would you give us an update on your conversation with the airline executives?
Yeah.
Did you explain to them what's coming? What was their reaction?
I did, and they explained to me where they're coming from. I mean, they went from, as I said, full planes, packed, the best year they've ever had by far, to boom, one day empty because of what we have to do to win this war. Or we would have a level of death like people haven't seen before. So they've been fantastic. I mean, they've been great. But, they went from being extremely happy to being people that are running companies that are going to need some help. And we'll help them, Jennifer.
On SBA loans, would you be willing to give us an update on how that's going? We've been getting some reports that counties have been having difficulty getting...
Well, it's going. I mean, there's a lot of influx to those loans, as you can imagine. A lot of people are looking at it, but we're going to be increasing funding a lot. They're very well prepared to do what they have to do, and the SBA is doing a fantastic job. She is doing a really good job, the administrator. John?
Mr. President, a couple of questions for Dr. Burks, if I could. Dr. Burks, French researchers have had some luck with hydroxychloroquine in shortening the duration of disease. Is that something that might be in the arsenal of therapeutics here in the United States?
I think we're exploring every one of those issues. The president asked for a critical briefing on that today. He opened with that. It is more than that single drug. There are other drugs that individuals are looking at. Just to go back to what we've talked about many times, there is things that look really good in cell culture against the virus that may look good in small animals and then don't have an impact in humans. And so those are the pieces that we're looking at very carefully. Of course, there's always anecdotal reports, and we're trying to figure out how many anecdotal reports equal real scientific breakthroughs.
And second question, are you confident of the seasonality of coronavirus?
All we can do is look at the past to inform the future. We know what SARS looked like. We also know, and I just want to put this out, I know you can get it online, look at the curve in China and look at the curve in South Korea. Those curves were accomplished in still the winter season. And so we're trying to understand what those relationships are. We're very interested in the curves in Italy because of their different approach, and we're following every single country's curves. And so all we can do is look at prior coronavirus and prior respiratory infection RNA viruses. These are RNA viruses. When you look at flu in the northern hemisphere, when you look at parainfluenza and some of the other cold viruses, and if you look at SARS, that's the way the peak normally occurs. But that is a November to April. We all started later. And so you're asking me to predict based on a later start, and that's what we're trying to really look at China and South Korea to really inform that.
Caitlin, go ahead.
A question for Secretary Wilkie, if you don't mind, or you can answer if you'd like. How many veterans of those that need to be tested have been tested?
Those that have needed to be tested, we believe we've caught most of them. Right now, we have 44 veterans who have tested positive. Sadly, one has passed in Portland. We are working with state labs and private companies to make sure that testing is available. Because the president had us out aggressively early, we have been in a better place than most healthcare systems in the country. I cannot predict, as Dr. Burke said, when the next surge will be, if it will be. But one of the things that we do at VA is that we prepare for national emergencies, be they national disasters or epidemics. We started preparing for this. We started stockpiling equipment. Our equipment is stable, and I think that's in large part because of the instructions the president gave me.
But do you have a number of how many have been tested out of the number that
we've tested? Several hundred. I can't give you the direct number.
The other day.
Yeah, we've tested several hundred. Yes, we've tested several hundred. I don't know exactly. I do know that 44 veterans have the virus. Most of those are quarantined at home.
Go ahead in the back.
Thank you, Mr. President. The question for Dr. Burks, quickly. I'm trying to understand what it's about the mortality rate. Yesterday, we underlined the fact that we had reached 100 deaths. And this morning, we wake up and we're at 110. Within 12 hours, we climbed by 10%. Is it something we have to expect from now on, a 10% increase every 12 hours?
So very early on in each one of these cases, if you look at all of the countries to date, the mortality is higher at the beginning because you're diagnosing the sickest, the ones who came in quite ill. And I just want to remind the American public that still the risk for serious illness in the majority of Americans are low. But that doesn't mean that you can't transmit it to one of those higher risk groups. And that's why we're asking for all Americans to take responsibility. You're seeing mortality or deaths today from infections that occurred 2 to 3 weeks ago in general. The other thing that you're seeing is the dramatic and very difficult impact of this virus in nursing homes. And that's why very early on, the president and vice president had us come out and CMS put those very strict rules in place. And everybody thought we were being too strict and keeping loved ones away from their family in nursing homes. If we're going to solve this with a lower death rate, we have to protect the elderly because their percent is much higher in mortality than any other age group.
Go ahead, please.
Mr. President, there's reporting that the federal government has a plan that shows that this coronavirus outbreak might last as long as 18 months. Are you seeing those numbers?
No, we're not seeing that at all.
And then my second question is, there are at least one White House official who used the term Kung Flu, referring to the fact that this virus started in China. Is that acceptable? Is it wrong? Are you worried that having this virus be talked about as a Chinese virus, that might
I wonder who said that.
Focus,
you know who said that?
I'm not sure the person's name, but would you condemn the fact
say
that
the term again?
A person at the White House used the term Kung Flu. My question is, do you think that's wrong, Kung Flu? And do you think using the term Chinese virus, that puts Asian Americans at risk, that people might target that?
No, not at all. I think they probably would agree with it 100%. It comes from China. There's nothing not to agree. Okay, how about the last question? Please go ahead.
Switching gears to a larger question here. We've seen that before the pandemic, there were a lot of Americans that were already alienated. We saw deaths of despair increasing through suicide and other things. Now, as these individuals, a lot of times in rural parts of the country, are self-isolating, what is your message to those individuals, and what do you hope that individuals, communities, and churches will do to reach out?
My message is to all Americans, but to those Americans who are going through a lot, we love them, we're with them, and we will not let them down. Thank you all very much.
To President Trump at a briefing having to do with coronavirus, its spread, what the goal is. Meanwhile, we're getting a host of headlines crossing the Bloomberg, ways to try to stem some of the financial burden. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac said they're going to suspend foreclosures to aid the virus relief. Meanwhile, over in Germany, you've got Angela Merkel, chair, saying that Germany will do everything it needs to help companies. And in response to a lot of the shifts, as we have limit down on stocks that have triggered their circuit breaker, we are seeing the dollar surge to all-time highs. Right now, U.S. stocks are frozen. The S&P is frozen at 7% down. Right now, let's get a check of everything that's going on. Doug Kersner has that right now. Doug.
Yeah, Lisa, S&P 500 down 7%. You're right. We have triggered the circuit breakers for the fourth time this month. Dow Industrial Average negative 7.8%. And if you look at the bond market right now, the 10-year Treasury is added about 5 basis points in yield, 1.12%. You also pointed to the dollar, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index right now, better by nearly, let's call it 2.2%, right? We're seeing a pullback in the yen vis-a-vis the greenback at 108.30, and the euro down in a major way by about 1.7% against the greenback at $1.815. So we had President Trump invoking the Defense Production Act. This is going to allow the government to ensure the private sector can ramp up production of emergency medical supplies. The president also asking HUD to suspend all foreclosures and evictions through April. One of the things we were talking about yesterday, commentary from Treasury Secretary Mnuchin on the unemployment rate possibly spiking to 20%. That was if Congress did not agree with the White House on that aggressive stimulus package. Today, the president saying that he did not agree with Mnuchin's warning on the unemployment rate. Kind of curious, too, because earlier today, Mr. Mnuchin kind of backed away from that assessment. AP is reporting Detroit's big three automakers are shutting down factories. Let's get to Dave Wilson now. He's looking at trading in American depository receipts. Hey, Dave.
Hey, Doug. We're seeing
ADR is down more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index down 7.7%. So that exceeds the 7% drop in the S&P 500 that triggered the circuit breaker in a 15-minute trading halt. Japan's SoftBank Group has fallen 20% in U.S. trading. The investment firm told WeWork shareholders that it may back out of a deal to invest $3 billion in the co-working company. Analysts said SoftBank might struggle to refinance debt as credit markets worsen. UK ADRs of cruise line owner Carnival have tumbled more than 34%. They're headed for the biggest daily decline since trading resumed after the 9/11 attacks in 2001. And Carnival's U.S. shares are down by a similar percentage. ADRs of Latin American airlines are tumbling along with U.S. carriers. Azul, run by JetBlue founder David Neeleman, has lost almost 37.5%. Gol has dropped 26%, and LATAM Airlines Group has declined more than 34%. Now, Japan's Fujifilm Holdings has risen 20%. China said it's considering whether to use the company's antiviral drug Avigan to treat coronavirus. Now, to be sure, Avigan is a generic medicine in China. Fujifilm's local patent expired last year, Doug.
All right, thanks to Dave Wilson. Let's take a quick look at the price of oil. WTI in New York trading is down 19%. We're at $21.83, cracking that $23 a barrel mark for the first time in 18 years. Saudi Arabia has vowed to keep producing at record high levels over the coming months. You're caught up on market action. Lisa.
Thank you so much, Doug. Let's dig a little bit deeper into that market action, since it is dramatic, as it has been every day for the past 2 weeks. The third time in 3 days, or the third day in the past 3 days where we've hit a circuit breaker. Kriti Gupta joining us now, covers all things markets for us here at Bloomberg News. And I'm curious, from your perspective, what people are saying about the drama behind the scenes here, the fact that the volatility has just reached unprecedented levels and at an unprecedented pace.
That's right. We've said this a lot lately. It's liquidity, liquidity, liquidity. That's what's happening here. And that's especially what you're seeing, not just in stock markets right now, but you're seeing this across the board, especially in the currency markets as well, especially with the dollar. We just saw a massive drop here in the pound as well. And what I'm hearing is just no liquidity, lots of stops, big slippage here. Really, the concern is it's a fancy way of saying there's more sellers than buyers here.
Well, but you can go a little further, right? There are more sellers than buyers of everything, right? I mean, of everything that you can. And there's a question of where the haven is at a time when liquidation is the prevalent feeling and the prevalent sentiment. Also, the concept of a dollar shortage. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. That's right. The trick here, and from my understanding of the people I'm talking to, the trick here is what asset, or the kind of key question is, what asset can you get in and out of easily, right? Very definition of liquidity. So we're talking about the dollar here. How do you get into treasury markets, for example, which seems to be the asset class that is actually getting the most support right now, especially with the Fed really targeting kind of the front end of the curve, and especially with the commercial paper facility kicking in, more repo operations. How do you get into the treasury market should you need to get in? It's dollars, and that's why you're seeing this funding squeeze from around the world.
So what's going to stop it? Because we have seen the Fed step in. We've heard about the stimulus plans from the federal government in the United States. The ECB is coming out and saying that they're going to take more aggressive measures to backstop debt there. Why isn't this all helping?
Well, once again, I hate to have a no better answer than it's purely sentiment. After you're seeing sell-offs, 6% positive yesterday, down to 7% now, we're seeing that trading halt as well. It's coming back to sentiment because you're still seeing people not have full access to the information. First of all, we're not seeing a peak of the curve. We still have a shortage of tests, a shortage of ventilators, and it's also a distance story, right? A lot of these headlines coming here are coming out of New York City in particular, where a good chunk of the financial trading happens. So when you see these kind of headlines that I believe Governor Cuomo earlier said today, we need 37,000 ventilators, we have 3,000. That kind of hits very close to home. And you really saw that in the early kind of signs of when these virus headlines hit. As we got those virus headlines closer and closer to New York City, you saw fades in the market correlating to that.
Yeah, and it's not just New York City, right? Because we're also seeing it in London and elsewhere, where you see people being told to work from home, quarantined. And it is alarming and concerning and shifting everybody's balance and sense of reality. Kriti Gupta, thank you so much for being with us. Kriti Gupta, Bloomberg Markets live team reporter, here with us in our interactive broker studios. We are limit down, which means that stocks are frozen for 15 minutes before they can start trading again. The S&P lower by 7%. I'm Lisa Abramowitz. Coming up here, we're going to be talking more about just that fiscal package that we're getting from Washington, D.C. How extensive will it be? How quickly will it pass? And will it stave off some of the economic declines? That's up ahead on Balance of Power on Bloomberg Radio.
If you promise to cover the latest financial and business news from Asia,
we're talking about social enterprises in Asian countries
with expert analysts who really understand Asia.
Aren't you encouraged with respect to U.S.-China trade?
Then you must be us.
Tell us about the trend within this part of the world.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
What sort of fiscal stimulus do you think we'll see?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
At age 30, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, you can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
He's failed to gain traction. Will he have to abide by a subpoena?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
You took the first step and quit smoking, but even former smokers may still be at risk for lung cancer. That's why SaveByTheScan.org wants you to know about a new low-dose CT scan that can detect lung cancer early. It takes only 60 seconds and could save your life. You took the first step, now take the next. Visit SaveByTheScan.org for a simple quiz to see if you're eligible and talk to your doctor about screening. SaveByTheScan.org is brought to you by the American Lung Association's Lung Force Initiative and the Ad Council.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Vattel Shah is Senior Project Engineer at Mott MacDonald, a global engineering consultancy with more than 16,000 employees. He earned his PhD at New Jersey Institute of Technology, and as an adjunct professor is helping NJIT students explore emerging technologies.
My focus is renewable markets, emerging technologies, the idea of floating cities. What are we doing to develop that? What will happen to the city on the water? Well, you're going to have waves hitting it. You're going to have solar. How are you going to develop plants? How are you going to develop vegetation and farming? That sort of thought process happens at NJIT. We actually plan out what will the city look like. How do we develop that? So in 10 years, we're actually ready to take on those challenges when we have our first development in the water. NJIT also has been doing a lot of work in self-healing materials. So taking the polymers and the new material that we have in our material sciences departments and putting them into things like concrete, things like steel, reinforcing our soil.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, we're at 17 past the hour right now. Trading has resumed after the circuit breakers were triggered about 20 minutes or so ago for the fourth time this month. Talk about volatility. And speaking of which, the VIX right now is at 81.9. So intraday, we're trading up by about 8%. Normally, we don't talk about the VIX in percentage terms. Focus on that 81.8 level. The S&P 500 down about 7.7%. Energy shares are being clocked today. The S&P 500 energy index is down nearly 13%. You have to look no further than crude oil, which right now is down 19%. WTI 21.90. This is after Saudi Arabia vowed to keep producing at record high levels over the coming months. Dow Industrial Average weaker by 8.5%. NASDAQ Composite down 6.9% right now. WTI crude I told you about. Let's look at Brent at 25.40 for a loss of about 12% right now. In the bond market, 10-year Treasury adding not quite 4 basis points. We're at 1.12%. The dollar on a tear with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising by 2.2%. We've got a weaker yen, 108.35, and the euro being clobbered today against the greenback. We're at $1.0821. You're caught up on markets. Back to balance of power.
Thank you so much. Right now, we want to dig a little bit further into the fiscal stimulus that the Trump administration is proposing. We have heard the ticker number of $1.3 trillion. This includes helicopter money, or basically sending American families a check so that they can meet their bills through this period of time. To parse out how effective the plan will be, let's bring in Catherine Baker. I'm so pleased to say she is a professor. She is the Dean and Emmett Dedman Professor at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy over there in Hyde Park. Catherine, thank you so much for being with us. What's your initial take on the program as outlined? Does it effectively address the immediate concerns, which is meeting bills, making sure people can pay for hospital stays, and also the coronavirus testing?
I think that immediate concern is exactly the right place to focus. A stimulus bill could have two goals, and I think the attempt is to get both of those accomplished. The first is short-term social insurance, safety net spending. There are people who are not getting income who still have to buy food and pay rent and take care of their families, so getting dollars to those families immediately provides a vital safety net. But then there are longer-term concerns. How do we reinstate demand and get the economy going again once people are actually in a position to think beyond those immediate needs and go out and buy things that will employ other people and keep businesses afloat. So we need to be thinking short term right away, but also longer term to weather what could be a very bad recession.
Catherine, you've done so much work about the healthcare system in the United States, and this is very much the pain point right now, the big concern of politicians as they try to prevent this sort of overwhelming wave that they're expecting. How could the U.S. healthcare system have been better prepared to handle something like this, given the fact we may see something like it again?
We do not have a very coordinated healthcare system, and that has some small advantages in generating innovation and tailoring care to individual patients' needs, but it comes with a substantial disadvantage that's in sharp relief in a national crisis like this, that we don't have great mechanisms for coordinating resources, and we're relying on individual hospitals, individual insurers, state Medicaid programs, as well as the federal government to make sure that we manage the limited capacity that we have.
Right now, how badly prepared are we, I guess is the way to put it, given the fact that we have ships basically coming up to New York to provide hospital beds and ventilators?
I think we have two key problems. One is lack of capacity and lack of equipment. Do we have enough ventilators? Do we have enough hospital beds? And then we have a second problem that makes the first one worse, which is efficient allocation of the resources that we have. We don't have great mechanisms in place yet to make sure that the ventilators are where they need to be and that hospital beds are going to the sickest patients. There's a mismatch in space and in capacity, even for the limited capacity we have. So we need to be particularly effective at allocating resources given those constraints, keeping people at home who can be safely at home, deferring optional or discretionary care, making sure we keep our healthcare workforce healthy so that they can continue to work. Those are of vital importance in the coming weeks.
Another aspect that this has really thrown cold relief on is that a growing number of physicians have been going into specialty practices rather than becoming generalists because the specialties pay more, and there is a shortage of internists, and that's sort of been something highlighted by this whole effort. Do you have a sense of how vast the sort of undersupply, sort of a harsh term to use for human beings, but the lack of general practitioners there are relative to the need?
It's particularly acute right now during this crisis, obviously, but it's been a persistent problem that we have too many healthcare resources in some geographies, in some specialties, in some areas, and too few resources in others. So we need to adjust our payment plans through Medicare especially, but more broadly in the healthcare system to promote not only physicians entering general practice or internists and the like, but also other healthcare workers like nurse practitioners, physician assistants to be able to practice at the top of their license and provide care that extends the physician workforce effectively and provides more resources for basic care management. Now, right now, we are not as concerned with basic care management. We're concerned with averting a crisis, but that problem will persist in the U.S. healthcare system unless we change our payments.
Catherine Baker, thank you so much for being with me today. A really important topic on a moment of crisis for the entire world. Catherine Baker, a leading scholar in the economic analysis of health policy, professor at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy, with extensive research into healthcare policy and economics, very much at the forefront right now. As the world reels from the coronavirus and its spread, the mortality rate being somewhat above that of influenza, but we don't really know. And that has been the problem, is the lack of knowledge around the virus, around its spread, as well as how to cure it with either a vaccine or a medication. Right now in markets, we are seeing that uncertainty reflected in another day of breaching the limit down in U.S. equities. The S&P now is trading again, as Doug was saying. It is down 7.4%, the NASDAQ down 6.6%, and the Dow down 8.5% as markets reel. Meanwhile, the dollar really standing out as the only haven, reaching the highest level on record. If you look at the Bloomberg dollar spot, people looking for a place to park while they wait this storm out. Coming up, we talk more about what to expect. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. stocks continue to fall, which triggered a pause in trading for 15 minutes today. The Dow was dropping over 1,650 points to 19,575. S&P 500 down 7%. The Nasdaq falling 6%. Well, the aggressive selling today has reached a fevered pace as investors lose confidence in some of the measures designed to shore up the economy. The Trump administration wants to send Americans 2 rounds of checks, which would cost the government a total of about $500 billion. But Detroit's 3 automakers have announced that they will close all their factories due to worker fears about the coronavirus. Meantime, the Department of Housing and Urban Development says they will suspend foreclosures and evictions through the end of April as the country combats the coronavirus outbreak. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
The market's in focus every business day. The P&L Podcast with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz.
Are there some sectors that you want to have more or less exposure to?
What's behind this engine of gains?
Analysis of the day's Wall Street action.
The U.S. market looks relatively safe.
From Bloomberg Intelligence, Bloomberg Opinion, and influential newsmakers.
Ward McCarthy joins us right now.
P&L with Paul Sweeney and Lisa Abramowitz. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, the president thought he could defeat the narrative of COVID-19 with his usual tactic of, quote, censorship through noise. But the virus is proving resistant.
People's lives are going to be disrupted on a daily basis, and as that happens, the alternate reality he's created is inevitably going to implode.
Catch On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC studios on TuneIn today.
School is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seizechange.
change.
Melissa from Michigan. I work an extra part-time job serving lunch at my child's school, but I still can't afford to put food on our table.
Daniel from California. Choosing whether to pay the rent or pay to fix the car to get to work doesn't leave us with much at all. Now we can't even pay for meals.
Hunger is a story we can end. End it at feedingamerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube. Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. I'm Lisa Abramowitz in for David Weston. A tumultuous day in markets, tumultuous day on Washington, D.C., where the focus really is on how to create a fiscal plan that's big enough to stave off some of the economic slowdown from the coronavirus. Right now, let's get some of those headlines, and we will dig into it all coming up. Doug Christner has that.
Yeah, Lisa, we're hearing that Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has sent that fiscal proposal to Congress. It's worth $1.3 trillion. It will include $500 billion in checks to individuals that would begin landing in bank accounts in less than 3 weeks. Now, also included in this, $50 billion in loans to the distressed airline space. Right now, we're seeing the S&P 500 down 8.5% at session lows. Volume today, very robust. The Dow Industrial Average right now weaker by 9.5%, and in the NASDAQ market, the composite index is down 7.8%. Earlier, President Trump invoked the Defense Production Act. This is going to allow the government to ensure private sector production can ramp up for the manufacturing of emergency medical supplies. The president also has asked the FDA to reduce regulatory barriers. Now, the president said that he has asked for an FDA-related news conference either today at some point or perhaps tomorrow. Now, he also wants HUD to suspend all foreclosures and evictions through April. He went on to say that he does not agree with Treasury Secretary Mnuchin's warning of yesterday when Mnuchin warned that the unemployment rate could spike to around 20%. That was if Congress did not agree with the White House on the magnitude of that stimulus package. Looking at some industry-specific news, the big three automakers in Detroit have shut down their factories. Look at the bond market, long-term interest rates moving up just a bit. 10-year Treasury adding nearly 6 basis points in yield. We're at 1.13%. Big day for the dollar if you're long. Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index higher by 2.2%. We've got a weaker yen, a weaker euro now at $1.833. And sterling right now at $1.1554, so coming in quite a bit. Big story in commodities is the rout in crude oil. WTI down 21% right now. We're trading 21.15. Saudi Arabia vowing to keep production at record high levels over the coming months. That's markets. Back to Balance of Power.
Thank you so much, Doug. This has been a dramatic period of time as markets swoon, whipping through the lower bound there of the first circuit breaker. Now the S&P, as Doug was saying, 9.2% decline past that 2,300 mark. We're now at 22.95. One area that's gotten uniquely punished consistently has been the airline sector. I'm looking at United Airlines shares down more than 40% right now, and Delta Airlines shares also just absolutely tumbling down 35%. The question is, what will be of the airline sector when we emerge from the coronavirus slowdown? Joining us is Jeff Weiss, private pilot, science journalist, and author of the new book, The Taking of MH370. Jeff, can you just start by saying how resilient do you think the major airline companies can be in light of the fact that travel has completely stopped globally at this point?
Well, I don't think they're very resilient at all. It's just stunning how their market has effectively ceased to exist almost overnight. and they don't have the reserves to. I mean, they have enormous capital costs. Their planes are worth a lot of money. They've got these massive personnel, staff, and they have huge costs and no revenue. So it's incredibly scary for them.
Jeff, there's a criticism, and it's been persistent and growing louder, that U.S. airlines spent 96% of free cash flow on buybacks over the past few years, and this could have been money that they set aside for a time exactly like this. Do you think that that's a legitimate argument that should work against their getting a bailout from the federal government?
Well, it certainly, I hope, will lead to a realignment of people's philosophy of corporate governance when all this is over. It's not just the airlines that did this. Boeing also, of course, spent billions and billions on share buybacks, didn't invest in their product or their people or maintain a reserve to weather storms like this. The horse is out of the barn now. So the question is, how do we? And the question really is, okay, this catastrophic event has happened. How do we keep our economy afloat? And if these airlines have to be bailed out, so be it. But I think we have to be careful not to repeat what happened in 2008, where all the bad behavior was essentially rewarded. And I think what we're, to draw the metaphor of the viral infection, what we're suffering right now is a reinfection of the toxic corporate governance of the last decade of the aughts, where reckless, this idea that we have to remove all rules, we have to just incentivize people to maximize shareholder value. We're paying the price for that now, and hopefully we'll realign after this is over.
Which practices are you talking about as being particularly egregious, aside from share buybacks? Are there other corporate governance issues that you feel are endemic within the airlines?
Well, I think, and this is not limited to airlines, I think it's true across the U.S. economy, is the incentivizing of executives to maximize present short-term shareholder value, and to essentially only pay attention to that one metric and to compensate executives hugely if they meet these benchmarks, and so the result is that you have companies that have been using the wealth that they've been generating not to reinvest in the future, but to just pay out immediately. So you have no reserves left over, and you cannot weather any kind of crisis. I would point out sort of philosophically that you can be highly efficient. Imagine a long distance runner who has no body fat, but who is like everything about their life and everything about their body is geared towards efficiently running long distances or sprinting a short distance. And then conversely, like someone who's robust, who's resilient, who has lots of fat, who is maybe bulky and has the ability to weather a storm. What we tend to look at just efficiency as the ultimate metric. And I think what we need to realize, hopefully, we'll have the understanding that bad things can happen. It's amazing how quickly, after the last massive crisis at the end of the Bush administration, I think so many of us said, well, this will never happen again. And again, I feel like we're right back to where we were, right? And even in a crisis that feels even 10 times worse.
It's a little ironic is probably the wrong word. It's interesting to see how the focus is shifted to corporate governance away from the financial sector, as that area or some of the areas within that start to look for government backstopping. Do you think that this is a sector that should be nationalized? Do you think that there has to be some sort of streamlining on the federal level? Or do you think that just better corporate governance, being better prepared for a downturn, maybe having capital buffers the way that banks do, would be a sufficient fix?
I think we need to learn to think strategically. I think there's been a lot of dogma, frankly, about the primacy of shareholder value as the be-all and end-all. I think we need to really to think systemically as a matter of course, to think about systemic resilience. After 2008, there was a lot of talk about analyzing banks' reserves, shock testing them, making sure that they were going to be able to endure a crisis. That was all, as you said, focused on the financial sector. I think what we're seeing now is that the ability to withstand shocks is something that's important in every part of the economy.
Jeff Weiss, thank you so much for being with us. Jeff Weiss, private pilot, science journalist, and author of the new book, The Taking of MH370, talking about the airline industry, which has been absolutely pummeled in recent share action, with the biggest airline companies approaching banks and even governments around the world looking for some help to get through a time where travel has all but stopped. If you look up in New York City, normally you hear jets flying overhead and you can see them, and there are none. Right now in markets, we're looking at the S&P going below that 2,300 mark for a bit, but now above it back again, 2,316 at points, and we're looking at a decline of 8.4%. Coming up, we'll dig more into what to expect from the fiscal response. This is Bloomberg Balance of Power.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Why is delivering the best client experience a top priority at BNY Mellon's Pershing? Michelle Feinstein, Director of Client Engagement, explains.
Today's investors want a financial relationship that's on demand, customized, and leverages the latest digital technology. At BNY Mellon's Pershing, helping advisory firms and broker-dealers create great experiences for their clients is our priority. Through our integrated wealth experience, we give you a high-touch service, flexible technology choices, and expert insights, so you can deliver a highly personalized experience to your clients at every step, from onboarding to wealth planning, to performance analysis and more. And because we're part of BNY Mellon, you'll benefit from more than 230 years of strength and stability. At Pershing, we're personally invested in your success.
Visit Pershing.com to learn more about Pershing's integrated wealth experience. Pershing LLC and Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC are both members of FINRA and SIPC.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
In just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
My mother was always very active and independent, and she was familiar with her neighborhood. But one day she stopped at the stop sign for much longer than usual. She wasn't even really sure where she was at.
It's important for you to talk to someone about it. I felt so much better after my son told me, Mom, we'll figure it out.
When something feels different, it could be Alzheimer's. Now is the time to talk. Visit alz.org/our stories to learn more. A message from the Alzheimer's Association and the Ad Council.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
The severity of this risk-off mood that we're seeing in markets today cannot be understated or overstated. Dow Industrial Average right now down by about 8.7%. Earlier, we had the circuit breakers triggered for the fourth time this month. Third time this week, I believe. S&P 500 down 8%. We are off session lows right now. And in the NASDAQ market, the composite index is weaker by about 7.3%. Trouble spots, well, oil is one of them. WTI down more than 20%. We're trading $21.50. And this is adversely impacted, not surprisingly, a lot in the energy complex. The culprit, I guess you could say, not the least, Saudi Arabia vowing to keep production at a record high, but there's also a lot of concern about the economy going into recession, obviously, and the degree to which that's going to just slam demand for crude and crude-related products. In the dollar space, the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index is up 2%. We've got a weaker yen at 108.59. The euro tumbling 1.4% at $1.845. And the pound against the dollar right now is also on the back foot, with sterling at $1.16, a bit off the worst level of the session. Volume in terms of the total equity space here in the U.S., more than 10.3 billion shares. And in the bond market, 10-year Treasury, it's up just about 6 basis points in yield. We're at 1.13%. You're caught up on markets. Back to Balance of Power.
Thank you so much, Doug. Doug was mentioning the dollar, and that's been very much in focus, particularly for developing markets, which borrow a lot of money in dollars and do a lot of financing in the greenback, which part of it was bleeding into part of the dollar shortage that we keep talking about. Someone who has been very much on the forefront of this for years, advising politicians and governments and corporations around the world, is Lester Munson of the BGR Group team. And he previously has been part of the Foreign Policy and National Security Committees in a host of different governments. Lester, I'm so glad you could join us, because I'm very much focused on the dollar pressures on the developing world. Do you have a sense, based on the conversations that you're having with people, as for example, the Mexican peso goes to its weakest ever versus the dollar, how big of a concern is this in the developing world?
Well, I think we're actually yet to see the impact of coronavirus on the developing world. We're only now starting to get some numbers out of Latin America and Africa and other places. So I think while the crisis is burning hot right now here in the United States, and we're all pretty focused on what we're seeing around us, the next phase of this is probably going to be in the developing world, where frankly, you have different kind of demographics, different societies, but weaker health systems, and so there's no question that there's going to be another iteration of this crisis in exactly those places.
Do we have a sense? I mean, I know that people talk about Iran in particular as being a hotspot. Very hard to get a sense of exactly the scope and severity of the outbreak there. Do you have an update on just what's happened there and whether that sort of serves as a template for other developing nations?
Well, Iran kind of presents unique challenges. It's a closed society. It's a country that rejects a lot of the standards of the rest of the international community. So I think we don't want to read too much into it. But I was just a few days ago in Saudi Arabia, and part of that country is shut down because there's similar groups in Saudi Arabia, and they're seeing the virus spill over. So even though Iran is kind of a unique case, it's impacting the whole Middle East. But I think that's also something that's a national security concern, frankly, for the United States, where our forces are in Iraq, Iranian-backed forces are there also. There's been conflict between them just in the last few days. This is something that we really do need to keep an eye on, and if coronavirus starts impacting Iranian national security decisions, that's something we very much need to be concerned about.
Talking about national security, there was a breach of Health and Human Services, HHS, recently, a cyber attack, and this comes as people are focused very much on just responding to the crisis that is coronavirus. Also, North Korea fired some missiles into the sea, and I'm wondering, some people are speculating that rogue actors are going to act out more now because the developed world is in crisis mode. Do you think that there's credence to that?
Yeah, I do, Lisa, and I don't want to. And I think it's important to say we shouldn't freak people out. The attack on HHS, which I understand was a denial of service attack, and some of these other things that are going on are not exactly existential threats to the United States. And so, while some of that is of concern and we have to deal with it, this is not at all a threat to normal Americans, and we need to put it in perspective. I do think a little bit more concerning might be kind of the ramp up of rhetoric between China and the United States. To the extent the U.S. has a peer competitor in the world, it's China. And while I think China shares or has a lot of the blame for where coronavirus is right now, it really is important that the Trump administration and the Xi administration in Beijing find a way to ramp down that rhetoric, get to a place where we can collaborate and cooperate. Even though we have very different systems and we have some fundamental disagreements on our interests, it's important that the two countries are able to work together during this crisis. That actually concerns me more than the other stuff.
Really? So you don't feel like there has been a degree of cooperation? I know that scientists in China, in the U.S., in the United Kingdom, who I've spoken to, say that there's very close collaboration, more than really ever before, in terms of not necessarily being proprietary with the research. What are you pointing to in terms of the lack of cooperation?
No, you're entirely correct. And early on, and I think there are different versions of this, and I think we'll find out what really happened, once we're past the crisis. There was some evidence that China was sharing some scientific data, and that's good, and we need to encourage that. I'm more concerned about the rhetoric right now coming from the White House and the rhetoric coming from Beijing. China's been blaming the U.S. military for the coronavirus, which is totally inappropriate and crazy. The administration is responding by saying, this is all, China caused all of this, which is more accurate. But we really need to find a way to ramp down that rhetoric, because that can flow down into the bureaucracies and the national security state, and you're going to see more and more tension between the U.S. and China, and that's just not good. I think, especially now when there's a crisis, we should be finding more ways to work together.
Lester, I got to say, it's a little bit unnerving when I start thinking, okay, so we're dealing with this health crisis, and, could there be an escalation to something else that is perhaps longer lasting in terms of tensions and possibly flaring up with additional either trade wars or worse military? I mean, is that where you're going with this, or you're just saying it would be faster if we all kind of work together here?
I think it's a little bit of both, and I think yes, we need to focus on what we can do as Americans to slow down the spread of the virus. That's important. We can't stop doing our jobs, though, particularly in the national security space, and the U.S. has to continue to pay attention to what's going on around the world. The U.S. is the global leader. We need to stay in that role. We can't turn away from the other challenges we're seeing around the world, or other folks are going to step in and assert their will. So the U.S. needs to do both. We have to be able to deal with the crisis here at home. We also have to focus on what's going on around the world.
Lester Munson, a foreign relations expert and principal at BGR Strategies. Thank you so much for being with us today. Right now in markets, we are looking at an ugly tape. We're looking at the S&P down 8.1%. The Dow at one point breached 10% lower, now is 8.9% lower. And the NASDAQ, 7.4% decline. King dollar reigns supreme as liquidation is the word of the day. Coming up is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly. Jason, where are you today?
I'm in Sleepy Hollow, New York, and I'm just shaking my head, Lisa Bromwitz. I mean, this is really something like you and I have never seen, and we've lived through some things here with the markets. We're going to get into it amid this waiting game to see what Washington is going to deliver. We're going to talk to some small business lenders, some small businesses themselves, help understand the latest when it comes to the medical aspect of this. So a lot to come for sure.
Yeah, that's Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly. Just to give you a feeling of the mood on the street, Kit Jukes, FX strategist at Societe Generale, sends out an email. They're all emerging market currencies now, given how much we're seeing these swing around with volatility, absolutely massive, record levels of volatility. From New York, this is Bloomberg Balance of Power.
This week's On the Media, the president thought he could defeat the narrative of COVID-19 with his usual tactic of, quote, censorship through noise. But the virus is proving resistant.
People's lives are going to be disrupted on a daily basis, and as that happens, the alternate reality he's created is inevitably going to implode.
Catch On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
Began hearing from people and groups in need, including a pediatric cancer organization and a woman whose 12-year-old son has heart disease and was desperate for hand sanitizer to keep him safe. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
A pack needs someone to follow.
It's got to be important for somebody to have a breakout moment.
Don't look now, but they're behind you.
Imports declined 2.8%.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
Sources tell us that agreement is expected to include commitments on U.S. intellectual property.
With Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
Could we see that play into the results and the forward guidance?
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from my home in New Jersey, live from his home in New York. Welcome to Bloomberg Business Week for this Wednesday, March 18, 2020. I'm Carol Masser, along with my co-host Jason Kelly. Jason, this is safe to say the new world order for so many who are now working at home, including us.
That's exactly right. Here we are, and we are looking at a market where the circuit breakers have been tripped again earlier in the session. The fourth time in 7 days, I believe. It's a waiting game at this point, Carol.
Absolutely. It's all about awaiting more specifics on the stimulus programs that we are expecting from Washington. So it's kind of a tick-tock moment, and investors getting a little impatient. So we're going to be talking about all of this over the next few hours. First up, though, let's get a check on that trading session. It's been a tough one. Certainly, all risk is off. Let's check.
Yeah, definitely, Carol. Thank you so much. We're near session lows here for the S&P 500 with a loss of about 8.5%. And you're absolutely right. Market squarely focused on stimulus. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin, we are told, has sent a proposal to Congress worth $1.3 trillion, and it includes, we are told, $500 billion in total on checks to individuals that would begin landing in bank accounts in less than 3 weeks. And the package also includes another $50 billion in loans to the distressed airline sector. Energy being pummeled today. WTI crude oil is below $21 right now. We're at $20.90. The loss is greater than 22%. Saudi Arabia saying earlier it will continue to pump in a massive way, and add that to what we already know, which is apparently the global economy is facing a recession, and that's going to diminish in a great way demand for crude and all the crude-related products. S&P 500, as I mentioned, down by more than 8.5%. The Dow is off 9.3%. NASDAQ comp right now weaker by just about 8%. You look at the bond market, 10-year Treasury actually moving up in yield by more than 8 basis points. Right now, 1.16%. The dollar strong against the majors, with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index higher by 2%. The yen weaker at 108.40, and the euro is being clobbered. We're at $1.847 for a loss of about 1.4% on the day. That's markets. Back to Bloomberg Business Week.
Doug Krisner, thank you so much. We'll be checking in with you throughout the show. This portion of our show, Bloomberg Business Week, it's brought to you by Commonwealth Financial Network. For the sixth straight time, J.D. Power ranks Commonwealth #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms. Visit Commonwealth.com to learn more. And Carol, as we've been talking about, all eyes really on Washington. We heard from the president earlier. We're hearing from Treasury Secretary Mnuchin. He, as we discussed yesterday, right in the middle of all this, but investors really want some details here.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think it really is kind of a wait-and-see approach. We've heard about some big, broad strokes when it comes to programs coming out of Washington, but we want details. American citizens, American businesses, they want details. It's really as simple as that. So we'll be checking in throughout the next few hours with our team on the ground there in the nation's capital. Jason, we've also got an update on how hospitals are coping. Plus, we're going to hear about the effect on small businesses specifically. We'll be talking to some, in fact. We'll also find out about how towns are dealing with it. Some folks are, kind of going their own way. The mayor of Chattanooga is going to check in with us, and we'll also find out about the impact on business school students. This, in many ways, the cover of the magazine, The Lost Year. Think about those that are graduating from college or from graduate programs, from business schools. They really face an uncertain outlook, and that's certainly a difficult climate, and an unexpected climate to be in at this point in their careers.
Absolutely. And speaking of businesses, we're going to check in with the CEO of Mack Weldon, Brian Berger. He's been with us before, well-known online and brick-and-mortar retailer, about where we are now, where his business is, and where it may be headed in this, as you said at the very top, this new world order. For now, let's check the business week, and let's set the business week agenda, I should say. Dave Wilson, stocks editor, is there in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, stocks editor, as well as the author of the chart and stock of the day, alongside Kriti Gupta. She's a cross-asset reporter for Bloomberg, also there at World Headquarters. Dave, I want to start with you. This is where we try and help people understand the tone. The tone is worried and dour, to say the least.
Absolutely, Jason. I mean, I started covering stocks back in October 1987. it feels like that. It feels like 1989 and 1998 and 2008. And let me tell you, by some standards, it's even worse than the more recent declines. Let me tell you, the S&P 500, if you look at the movement over the last 10 trading days, so we're talking about the actual volatility of the index. We talk a lot about the VIX, which is tied into options on the S&P 500. But if you look at the actual index itself, over the past 10 days, the only other times in its entire history that you've seen this kind of volatility, 1929 and 1987. Wow. That's where we are.
Well, that's what remarkable. You know, Dave, if I can just come on in on and follow with you, and all of us have seen so many different market environments. For any of us who've been in this business for a long time, we've seen market sell-offs, whether it was the financial crisis or before that, if I think about that 1987 crash. But what's interesting, and I think this one has been so swift and so deep, and that, I think, has put everybody on edge.
Yeah, and there's an element of relentlessness over what we've seen in the past couple of weeks. Sure, we've had up days, but, you know, you think back to 87, it was really one day, October 19th, that sort of blew out stocks, and things started to recover, you know, from there. It's not like we've seen over the past, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, where things have just, for the most part, headed lower and lower and lower. I'm looking at an S&P 500 where 15 stocks are down more than 30% today. And bear in mind, most of these shares have been beaten up quite a bit over the last several weeks. I mean, you look at the airlines, Alaska Air down 37% as one example. MGM Resorts, which was down more than 30% just the other day, it's down 34.5% now. Carnival, down 33%. I mean, there are just so many examples. That's what's so stunning about what we're seeing here.
All right. So, Kriti Gupta, come on in here, because one thing we certainly need to talk about is oil, because that's at record lows as well, and certainly infecting and inflicting a lot on this trade, right?
That's right. You're seeing WTI down 23% on the day. Really crucial move. It's at its lowest level since, I believe, 2002. A few factors here at play. One is going to be just the larger risk sentiment. Oil does trade lower when stocks trade lower. That's a common, pretty risk move across asset. Another part is dollar strength here. We're seeing the Bloomberg Dollar Index at record highs today. So that's actually definitely playing into those oil contracts. And the third, today is the day where we got the official order, where the Ministry of Energy in Saudi Arabia gave the official order for Saudi Aramco to start producing about 12.3 million barrels a day in the coming months. The key word there being the coming months, which indicates that there are this price war is going to last a while.
Man, this is just all about, I feel like, an attack on that U.S. shale industry. I mean, think about how beaten up they are. They were kind of heading into all of this, but this is just really going to make some of these players either be consolidated with some of the bigger players or just go away. I mean, Kriti, that's what it's going to ultimately be about.
That's right, and that was kind of the big move that the Russians came out and said to begin with. We need to, regain our market share from American shale. But here's what it's evolved to. It's ended up becoming a kind of quest for market share in Europe and in the Russians' own backyard, where we're seeing the Saudis sell oil for as low as $10 a barrel on their Arab Light crude. So this is really not just focused on U.S. shale players anymore. This is a truly global competition for market share now.
All right, Dave, last word to you, 30 seconds. What do you look for the balance of the session here?
Oh, who the heck knows at this point? I mean, it comes down to, where do the S&P 500 and the Dow Industrials end up? I mean, you have to think about, are the gains from the start of Donald Trump's presidency going to go away? Are the gains from his election in 2016 going to go away? We're certainly getting close to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. All right. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Stocks Editor, you'll be back with us with your chart and stock of the day later on. Our thanks to Kriti Gupta from our cross-asset team. Carol?
Yeah, I think it's just pretty remarkable just watching this, and such a different tone, again, from what we saw yesterday. And I feel like that is how the environment is. We're going to be covering all of this, of course, over the next couple of hours. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. I'm Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly. Let's head to Bob Mooney. He's got world and national news headlines and an update.
Carol, Jason, from my home to yours, good day to you. President Donald Trump appearing in the White House briefing room for the third day in a row with his coronavirus task force. Trump spoke to reporters and said he considers himself as a wartime president.
I look at it, I view it as in a sense, a wartime president. I mean, that's what we're fighting. I mean, it's a very tough situation. You have to do things. You have to close parts of an economy that 6 weeks ago were the best they've ever been. We had the best economy we've ever had. And then one day you have to close it down in order to defeat this enemy.
Trump announced he's invoking a federal provision that allows the government to make the private sector help respond to the coronavirus pandemic. Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer warned of an economic recession as the coronavirus spreads through the country, and he criticized the Trump administration's latest call for issuing $1,000 checks to Americans in response. Schumer also criticized the administration for taking too long to react to the pandemic.
Sadly, unfortunately, and with awful consequences, this administration took far too long to wake up to this global crisis, wasting precious weeks downplaying the severity of the coronavirus that could have been spent in earnest preparation, building our test capacity.
China, meantime, has sent medical supplies to France to help health workers dealing with patients infected by the coronavirus and in need of masks and other protective material. Barring a miracle, Italy will surpass China in the number of coronavirus deaths in just one more day. Today, Italy has added more than 4,200 new cases for a total of 35,713 infections. Global News 24 hours a day, on air, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg.
If morning is not your favorite part of the day, then maybe you're not listening.
We finally start to make a move.
Tom Keene.
What would you expect from Bezos next?
Jonathan Farrell.
How uncomfortable should central banks be with this situation?
Morning should be good for you.
We had no idea where this would head on that morning after.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
1 in 3 adults has prediabetes. 1 in 3. That means it could be you, your football buddy, your football buddy, or you, your best man, your worst man, you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. While 1 in 3 adults has prediabetes, with early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council and its Prediabetes Awareness Partners.
What if you could keep the top economic experts in a conference room next to your office without having to feed them?
Do we need better optics? Do we need some substance? Do CEOs care about ESG?
We have seen quite a lot of stimulus pumped into the system already.
It's the biggest warning yet about the financial risks of climate change.
Now there are more ways to hear us. Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and at BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Listen, as a hiring manager, I've got to tell you, the best job candidate isn't always the typical candidate. Sometimes they're a grad of life.
Meet the grads of life. Young adults of unique determination and experience. An ideal fit for your company in an entry-level position, internship, or mentorship. They might not have every qualification you typically look for, but they're exactly who your company needs.
Sometimes the best candidates aren't the ones you're used to.
Go to gradsoflife.org to learn how to find, cultivate, and train this great pool of untapped talent. Brought to you by the Ad Council and gradsoflife.org.
Are you interested? In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Leave it to the New York Times to make the most intelligent pop music podcast out there.
Welcome to the New York Times Popcast.
On the Popcast, the Times music staff gets together for a weekly roundtable on the hottest topics in popular music. From award show autopsies and reactions to new releases to difficult-to-process scandals and emerging themes in the music landscape, hear distinguished music critics share their perspectives on the latest music news, songs, albums, and artists of note on the New York Times Popcast. Search and favorite Popcast to join the conversation.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong.
Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
We're seeing massive risk off right now with the equity market tumbling. Earlier, circuit breakers were triggered for the fourth time this month. The S&P 500 down 9% right now. The Dow is off 10%. In the NASDAQ market, the composite index weaker by a little more than 8%. Energy shares being punished today. WTI crude oil trading $20.60 a barrel, so we're below $21. This is probably the lowest we've been in about 18 years. Saudi Arabia vowing to keep producing at a record high over the coming months. The dollar on a tear against the majors, with the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index rising 2%. Got a weaker yen at 108.51, and the euro down nearly 1.5% at $1.0841. We also have a substantial drop in the pound vis-a-vis the dollar sterling at $1.1592. So a lot of the concern here, given the outbreak that we're dealing with vis-a-vis the coronavirus, how is the government going to step in? Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has sent a fiscal proposal to Congress worth $1.3 trillion. It includes $50 billion in loans for the airline sector. We were hearing earlier that Emirates is said to be grounding its entire fleet of A380s. Detroit's big three automakers have shut down their factories, and Europe has now confirmed more coronavirus cases than China. U.S. 10-year Treasury up 10 basis points in yield. We are at 1.18%. That's markets. Let's get back to Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, Doug, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly. Now, one story that struck me earlier and really caught my attention about governments finally getting the message that they're going to have to run exponentially bigger budget deficits to keep economies afloat as the coronavirus brings the world to a sudden halt. So there's lots of scrambling going on. I do want to talk a little bit about the economy and what we're seeing. Diane Swank, certainly friend to Bloomberg, chief economist at Grant Thornton. She's on the phone from Chicago. Diane, good to have you here. You too, we were talking earlier about folks who have seen a lot of different cycles, market cycles, economic cycles. You certainly have seen several. Where does this stack up?
There's just nothing to compare it to. The extraordinary, just absolute stop in economic activity, that's nothing that there is any precedence for. I mean, the losses that we saw compound during the height of the crisis were still done over the course of weeks and months, not literally overnight as cities were shut down. We're shutting down manufacturing and the service sector, everything all at once, and there's no ability for many consumers to actually go out and spend, even if they do get these stopgap measures. That doesn't mean the stopgap measures aren't absolutely necessary. We can't stop a recession from coming. We do have to go through this virus-induced recession, but we can keep people afloat in COVID-tainted waters that allow us to have a better rebound once we can ramp up again and the outbreak has abated.
And so, Diane, let's talk about the Fed, because obviously, if we were to come up with almost a metaphor, you've got Jay Powell sort of running through the arsenal, as it were, opening every cabinet that he can, taking out every weapon. What's been the most effective? What else does he and the team need to do here, or can they do?
Well, it's interesting. The op-ed piece written by former Fed chairs Bernanke and Yellen, who actually, have the value of hindsight and knowing exactly how bad a financial crisis can be, suggesting that the Fed, reopen, revisit Congress and restart the long-term asset-backed lending facility program that allows them to lend more aggressively and get credit to households and businesses, but also asking Congress for permission to actually buy in the corporate bond market, which is seizing up. They have the value of hindsight and knowing the actual, we don't want this health crisis. It is already metastasizing into a financial crisis. We have to stop that. And the Fed is going to need a lot more latitude. And actually their wings were clipped in the wake of the crisis because Congress didn't want them to have that latitude. Well, now you want them to have a lot more latitude. So literally they can start using the 3D printer to print up a new arsenal of tools to deal with and intervene in credit markets where they belong to keep the oil of the market machinery sort of in there. Without it, the market itself will seize up the entire economy, will seize up. Credit markets are that oil of the market machine.
So keeping that machinery of the market as well as the economy running, Diane, at this point, as much as we can at this point. During the financial crisis, we got an unbelievable amount of coordination, I felt, along all different branches of the government, of central banks, of bankers. I really felt like the global community we saw come together. Are we seeing that necessary coordination that we need to combat this on a health level as well as a market level and economy level?
Sadly, I wish we had a lot more coordination. I mean, first of all, we have fewer tools than we did back then. You really had a sense that all oars were in the water globally to try to get us from turbulent waters to land during the height of the financial crisis. The coordination has, we've seen, a lot of breaks in our coordination, and that is showing up in not only our dealing with the crisis, but how the crisis is fed from country to country. And I think, the thing we always forget is we all have a common enemy here. We have to fight this global phenomenon that is a health crisis together, and the common enemy is the new coronavirus, the novel coronavirus. And doing that collectively, testing, increasing the number of tests, being able to take lessons from countries like Korea and Singapore that didn't have as bad of a disruption from the viral outbreak and the surge in cases as we're seeing elsewhere, including here. That's important because this is not the last time we're going to have a pandemic. We have to get the lessons from this and move forward.
Diane, only got about a minute left here. When will we see the full economic impact of this? I know that's a really difficult question, but when will we start to at least get the sort of parameters or some sense of our arms around it? Any modeling that you guys are doing?
We're doing lots of modeling, and it's really hard because you get a decline in GDP that has a disproportionate decline in jobs. And, we're looking at something close to right now, a high of, close to 7.8% on the unemployment rate. And then as things come back, and that's almost over 7 million jobs, which is close to the financial crisis, it could be more than that because of just the sheer magnitude of people that are literally overnight losing jobs. That is what's really hard. That is not, the magnitude of losses in GDP don't compare to that because you don't have the same kind of reaction function. the models, you have to break them because you have this extraordinary disruption, but you can also have a very rapid ramp up after we get through the crisis and learn, even with antiviral drugs and better testing and better technology of how to mitigate the effects of the outbreak. We could be able to see a much bigger ramp up later on in 2021.
Well, and I think your point about this isn't the last time we're going to be dealing with these kinds of situations. So we really have to figure out the playbook and really prevent it and know how to be prepared for it. Diane Swonk, thank you so much. We know this is a busy time. Diane Swonk, Chief Economist at Grant Thornton, joining us on the phone from Chicago. Coming up next, folks, we'll continue to, of course, track the markets, and we'll also get a check of what's going on in the medical community when it comes to the virus.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. Stocks are getting crushed, with governments and central banks unable to get ahead of the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is down 2,121. The S&P 500 down 229. The Nasdaq Composite down 600. The runaway rally in Blue Apron continues as investors bet that the pandemic will boost its meal kit delivery business. The stock is up sevenfold since Friday, gaining 112% today alone. A historic surge may be on the way when the government issues its weekly report tomorrow on jobless benefit claims. Reports say about 30,000 claims have been filed since Friday in Connecticut. Ohio reportedly received over 48,000 claims in the last 2 days. Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and the Department of Housing and Urban Development are suspending mortgage foreclosures. Fannie and Freddie will halt foreclosures for 60 days. HUD suspension runs through April. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
The Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast. How did the Yankees become this mega valuable team? Where the money is flowing inside sports around the globe.
From the marketing perspective, where are the dollars spent?
From union heads to team owners, Scott Soshnick and Michael Barr speak to the names that power this multi-billion-dollar industry. Boston Red Sox CEO Sam Kennedy.
National Hockey League Commissioner Gary Bettman.
Bloomberg Business of Sports. Listen today on Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, or subscribe on Apple Podcasts. Are you in?
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, I'll talk with the author of a fictional story about a global pandemic that right now feels all too real.
All I did was just drew upon the trends. I just extended them. Unfortunately, real life seems to have outraced even some of my imagination.
Lawrence Wright joins me on the New Yorker Radio Hour from WNYC Studios. Listen to this episode on TuneIn today.
Managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience. Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing, LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard?
or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10-15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Hi, we're the Goo Goo Dolls. We're fortunate that our daughters have what they need to grow and learn. But that isn't the case for nearly 13 million kids in the U.S. that struggle with hunger.
Childhood hunger is a heartbreaking reality that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and provides it to families and children in need.
You can help kids in need in your community by visiting feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
That saying, success breeds success, it's true.
Are we seeing any improvement?
Carol Massar and Jason Kelly.
How would you describe your outlook?
Weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg Business Week, now live on YouTube.
Broadcasting live to New York, Bloomberg 1130. To Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 99.1. To Boston, Bloomberg 106.1. To San Francisco, Bloomberg 960. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Yes, indeed. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Wednesday. Carol Massar along with Jason Kelly. So coming up, we heard a lot from the Coronavirus Task Force update, but we're going to talk a little bit more about what's going on in the medical community, Jason.
Well, and that's what's so important, I think, for everyone to understand, you and me included, especially as we see the headlines continue to come in New Jersey, where you are in New York, where I am understanding the medical aspect of this really, really important. Let's get back to Doug Krisner first. He's got an update on that ugly trade. Hey, Doug.
Hey, Jason. Yeah, let's start with the medical community because during that press conference earlier today, President Trump said he asked the FDA to reduce regulatory barriers, and he said that he may have an FDA-related news conference either today or tomorrow. Interesting, they're pushing out this on the Bloomberg Terminal. Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates, he was speaking to users of Reddit, and he said the coronavirus shutdown could last as long as 10 weeks if things go well. The equity market really on the back foot today, a lot of risk off in major measures. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin saying the fiscal proposal to Congress that he has sent is worth $1.3 trillion. But the market doesn't seem to be convinced that they may happen in a timely fashion. The S&P 500 down about 9.5% right now. The Dow down 10.7%. NASDAQ Composite weaker by more than 8.4%. The major car makers shutting down factories here in the U.S. We also see shares in Boeing trading off by more than 26%. We were talking about the emergency loans for the entire airline space. This would include the domestic carriers. Boeing is hoping to be a part of that action. The stock right now is at 91.50, 52-week high on Boeing, 398. We are down by, that's about 72% right now. 10-year Treasury right now trading at a yield of 1.20%, so we've picked up about a little more than 12 basis points on the day. I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Back to Bloomberg Business Week.
All right, Doug, thanks a lot. We'll be checking in with you throughout the afternoon. Let's turn now to the medical side of this crisis. Lisa Romano joins us, Chief Nursing Officer for Cipher Health, on the phone in New York City. And Lisa, great to have you with us. And I should say, like anyone in the medical world, we really owe a deep debt of gratitude to. So thank you for all the work you're doing. Help us understand the screening side of this and the testing side, because that is at the core of making all of this better, right?
Yes. Thank you for having me. I can tell you that, COVID-19 continues to progress rapidly, seeing increasing number of cases. And we know that there are steps to take to protect yourself. But at the end of the day, it is essential that we perform screening before anyone comes into the hospital for any procedure or any visit. We need to keep the healthcare providers safe so that we have people to take care of those that are sick. So the screening that we are looking at following, CDC guidelines, and also now working with many hospitals in the U.S. that are taking care of patients with the virus, is looking for symptoms like a dry cough, fever greater than 100.3, and shortness of breath. The good news is that most patients do recover from infection with COVID-19, but we do see patients at a point that they start to experience symptoms of respiratory distress, difficulty breathing, that they do need care.